trickier and trickier. I don't know.
Trickier is a kind word.
Right.
Be like, waiting for the bus that never comes.
Oh, yeah, no, I really, I can't, it's just like honestly, no, because I'm not can't see out of my right. It's just things everybody was that like a month. Do you know if you're a blood vessel person, your eye, they're waiting for all the things of the blood. Really important. So I think, yeah, Corley, it's like a fog with like a pepper storm and Corley was like really pushing us the other day. And I was like,
Good evening. Good to see you all. It being 6 o'clock, I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Enfield Select Board on May 5th, 2025. The first item on the agenda will be the approval of the minutes of April 21st, 2025. Any comments from the board?
I make a motion, we approve as printed. They look very good.
I second that.
Yeah, they're always excellent.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have board reports. Eric, can we start with you?
So the planning board had their, public input for the zoning, 2 Saturdays ago now. That went very, very well. We have not met since then, but certainly next week is our next meeting and that will be,
I would certainly agree. Very impressed with it.
yeah, I thought it went very well. We had, would you say there were 40 people there probably?
Yeah.
Which is a really good number, really good turnout for that kind of event, so.
Yeah, I have 50 or.
Oh, 15, yeah.
Very good. What's the next step in that?
Well, the next step is for the planning board to digest everything they heard and, start putting pen to paper.
Okay, excellent. Tracy, I don't have anything.
A couple of quick notes from the Energy Committee. We're discussing rates. Hopefully they'll drop lower come June 30. We're optimistic about that. Also discussed the Community Resilience Building Workshop, of which Marta is a leading member of that. Looking forward to that at the end of the month. And Energy's input into that. On a state level, Kim Quirk was elected to be the board chair of Community Power Coalition. And Joanne Courtney was elected to be the chair of the Membership Outreach Committee. So we have very key people on the statewide Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire board, which is growing like gangbusters. Again, picking up some more towns, which we'll implement in the next few months. And that's pretty much it for energy.
It's great to have so much talent in the town.
It is. Oh, I will make one quick note if I might, please. The Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire is interested in purchasing from people who have solar power, renewal credits, renewal certificate credits, so that if you have solar power, you can be eligible to sell your credits to Community Power, and they will buy them from you, which they will then combine and have those for their purposes of renewable power within the state to satisfy those needs. And the committee has discussed the possibility of sending out a letter to people that have solar power, letting them know it isn't a great deal of money, but there's a few dollars that can be had if people want to sell their credits to Community Power, which has nothing to do with, you're not really selling anything except something that you're not actually using, the credits.
Katie?
Conservation met last Thursday and looked at some guiding principles, which turned out to be about class 6 roads. They had done a class 6 road for a follow-up, and they spent a lot of time on class 6 roads, which aren't actually a conservation issue. But there are conservation-minded things off of the class 6 roads. So trying to get that kind of rerouted back into conservation. And so there'll be some more follow-up on that next meeting. Trails update, Craig Sanborn completed a bridge, and I think we got a copy of the pictures. Did they send them to you?
No,
Oh, okay, I'm gonna have to ask you again. Did you get a copy?
I have some, that they sent to me.
They sent them to you, okay.
Suppose They're better than the ones that they had the other.
Okay, so we'll get them into the next newsletter because it is that's at Harrisbrook. So that was a pretty inexpensive way to get a really nice bridge in place so that people can access it. Jan Wellenick gave the school outreach update, and then we spent quite a bit of time looking at and learning about biochar and talking very briefly about summer outreach. So that's
I was at the previous conservation meeting when class roads were discussed. I thought they'd come to a final decision regarding class 6 roads.
yeah, I really thought so too, but go ahead,
Yeah.
Shirley.
Well, I think we did in one respect, but then we went on to talk about signs, and that's something I'll be talking with you further about. But it turns out there aren't many signs on them, and we did check to see
Right.
which ones needed it and which
Okay.
ones might be nice to have them on.
So you're not
There's
thinking of
some that may
readjust,
not.
you're not thinking of readjusting what are class 6 roads and what aren't. You're just focused purely on signs.
At this time. Yeah, we're not, the decision was made,
Mhm.
the decision you heard that night, that
Mhm.
stands. Yes.
Thank you. All righty. Next up, we have the town manager's report.
Yes. Staff report, we're pretty much in the same spot as we were at the last meeting. We still have police officer openings and we're moving towards a physical fitness test in the next week or two. We do have multiple applicants that'll be taking that physical fitness test. And then we have a possible part-time certified officer that might come on to help for vacations, those types of things. So we're working through that. Police department and Emily have also been working for the Memorial Day Parade, which is scheduled for Monday, May 26th with a tentative 10:30 start time. We'll get a little bit more information out as that gets closer. Citizens Academy, we look forward to our first class, which starts on May 22nd. And as you guys know, we have 17 students and look forward to this inaugural class. The .gov project that we signed on to has started. We had a cybersecurity audit by the Overwatch team last week, looking at some policies, different things, and they're going into our system. And we should get a report this week just to look at how we're doing overall and what recommendations they make. If we dove a little deeper into those documents, it's more than just a transfer to .gov. A lot of it, in other towns, they're shifting them to the Office 365 government, looking for other ways to be more secure with cybersecurity. We did I haven't got the report yet, but just talking to the guy, we did fairly well. A lot of the things that we've done over the last couple years are the security things that they're recommending to other people. So we're sitting in a pretty good place, and I don't think we're gonna have too much more than moving to .gov and maybe writing and adopting into law a couple different policies to help us move forward on that. Whitney Hall Public Safety Building. Whitney Hall continues to inch ahead, I think is the way I'll say it. We're mainly waiting for that main stairwell to be redone, which we're hopeful will get done this week. We thought it was going to be the end of last week, but now we're looking maybe more towards the end of this week. We'll keep working on that. I did have Defiance Electric up today to look at and start working on a few of their minor punch list items to finish on the upstairs. There's a few other items inside to get done, but we're getting closer and closer on that one, with the stairwell being the main thing. The public safety building is still on schedule and under budget. We did have a small delay getting internet connected. We were working with Comcast and we were hoping that it would have been in last week, but it looks like it's going to be in later this week to get the actual internet service up and running. And then once they do that, they can start programming heating units, those types of things. So
The town worked with Comcast, not Hub 66.
Hub 66 doesn't have fiber right there yet.
Okay.
So we had to go with Comcast in that area. Tentative substantial completion date is still early to mid-May. Finish work is nearing completion on the inside and exterior works being finished up. There has been some concerns about the cut across the new pavement on the front entry ramp. That was planned the whole time. It wasn't something they forgot and went back and did. They find that it was easier to do that than cut the strip and lay a big concrete foundation to put the trench drain in across. That's just the way they like to do it. So it wasn't an afterthought coming back to open it up. It was pre-planned to be done that way. So with that, we'll have some finished paving going in after that drain goes in, and we're really close to moving into that building.
I was driving past it with a friend of mine the other day, and they said, wow, that's a really good looking building.
It is a good looking building.
It is.
I think it is.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
sharp.
well designed.
Where are we at with the signage? Not the main sign, which just went up, and that looks terrific. The road sign for that building.
Working on and just signed a contract today. We actually pulled that out of Neagley and Chase's field of work. The original sign was, I'm just gonna say, way too expensive when we got there. So we've downsized it quite a bit, and we'll have that put up over the next couple months. I don't know where it'll be. That'll be delayed. We'll be in the building before it's up, but we did put the concrete piers in the ground and it's ready to be mounted as soon as we can get it done.
And now that sign is going to be larger outside. Based on that sign, and it'll be the first time that we'll see a large format, I think, of the logo being the sign. Will we be able to create one of those?
What do you mean, one of those?
One of these large type logos that we can then use perhaps in Whitney Hall.
Wouldn't we use
We
our
have
town logo?
The town logo is different than what is behind our
Yeah.
head.
Yeah,
The new signage is gonna have the new town logo.
Yeah.
And it'll be one of the first times that it'll be created in large format.
No, we have it. We had a large format sign at Los Alamos.
We did, okay.
we have the.
It's the same, it's the same photo. It's made in a way where it can be blown up as big as we want it to be.
Right, terrific.
So,
While we're on such topics, do we expect that the state of New Hampshire will be putting up any emergency lighting?
No.
Flashing, nothing?
no, we were gonna have to do that.
Yeah,
And then the state of New Hampshire made it so difficult and expensive, we decided not to do that.
okay.
So they didn't require it then?
No. It was
Great.
not required. It was something we were gonna do.
Mhm.
Once we got on site, the sight lines are fine from that driveway that they're pulling out.
Okay.
Our $8,000 sign started clearing $20,000 because of the state of New Hampshire. We decided, never mind.
Almost like bringing a crosswalk.
Don't say that word.
Thank you.
Solid Waste and Recycling Study Committee, applications are open for this committee, which will help the town study the town's solid waste and recycling services and make recommendations on future services. We have received a few applications, but that's still open and will be coming to you at our next meeting to put that committee together. Crystal Lake Watershed Planning, as I talked about in my last meeting, I'm working on the pre-application. I did get the initial draft done and submitted it to our friends at DES that were gonna help me look through it. They looked through it. They thought it was a really good first draft and they made a few recommendations for me to make a few changes to score more points. So I've pretty much finished those up and I'm finalizing, putting a few attachments on and getting the letters of support finished, which I think I will all have now, and we can get those attached and hopefully submitted this week, which is a few weeks prior to the deadline, so. Get that put in. In the land use area, invitations have been sent out for the Community Resilience Building Workshop that'll be held on May 29th. As Eric said, this is a great project coming together, working with the Nature Conservancy and Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission. And we look forward to that workshop later this month. And then we're actively working on the New Hampshire Planners Association Spring Conference that'll be held Friday, June 6th at the Community Building. And the Enfield portion, you'll see people wandering around town later in the day. We'll have afternoon session where we're gonna talk about some of the things going on here in Enfield, then we're gonna do a Main Street tour with the people, so. It'd be nice to get people all around the state here seeing what's happening in Enfield. In DPW, the sewer and infiltration. The infiltration project has started this last week. They did a lot of manhole repairs. They repaired 12 manholes throughout the town, and they're gonna be back to repair 8 to 9 more. So, good to stop, stormwater infiltration through those, and then they're currently scoping and cleaning the mains that will be lined in the upcoming months, so. As I mentioned, it was coming up at the last meeting, but Enfield DPW hosted a flagger training on April 22nd. The town of Enfield had 4 DPW staff and 1 police department staff that took the class. And there were 20 attendees overall from various communities, so it was nice again to host a class and bring people here to Enfield. The brush and yard waste facility at the transfer station is now open. We're working right now. I was trying to hold this off, but we're working to clean up the railroad ties at the Shed Street property. We are having a little bit of trouble finding a place that will take them, but we're gonna continue working on that and working with the state to see if we can figure something out. But we were getting to the point that if we didn't start cleaning them up, it was gonna delay the Shed Street project, so
Can't we just drop them off to the state since they're theirs?
we've talked about that.
I mean, I honestly though, like, why should we pay for their mess? You know, they've always got a reason they're dragging their feet to fix the crosswalk. It's like, here you go, here's your
Take the
railroad ties.
excavator and just push them up on the rail trail.
That might make some people ugly.
With that, highway is busy replacing problem culverts ahead of this year's paving projects. Next week, the crew will be replacing 4 culverts on Lock Haven Road between Ivy and Oak Hill Roads. Lock Haven Road will be closed during portions of the day, several days next week to get this done. So we'll put out a little bit more information when that's gonna happen, but that could be a little bit of an inconvenience from people.
School bus,
Yeah, they've worked very well the last couple of years at scheduling in between.
Yeah.
Most times.
it's the main artery.
For a
The
lot
rest
of
of,
people. that
well, the
use
rest of us
bus.
can probably go around, but it's the kid, when the kids are late to school, they actually have activities. As I've heard.
And then I have been working myself with DPW and Blacktop to figure out the exact repair we're gonna do at Mascoma Lakeside Park and get that final paving done, so. That's kinda where
I
we're
thought
at.
that was a new top. That was planned for a new,
We were planning to put a 1-inch top over the whole thing, and then after meeting with Blacktop, they said that'll help, but it won't solve the problem, so they actually, if you go out there, they use their equipment to look at the elevation of every single spot across that, and we've worked together to put a plan together, and they're getting us some final costs on that, but it's gonna be similar to that, we're just changing it up a little bit to make sure we have good drainage.
the town has costs on that?
I'm working with the contractor. The initial that we had, I think the contractor will be paying all of that unless there's something
That
additional.
was
that
what
we're
I think
adding.
we understood, that it was not at a town cost.
Yeah.
So is that a drainage problem?
Yes.
Yeah, there was,
Went out
That's
today,
not
we
the
see all
village
sorts of
issue.
tunneling.
the first
Paved
paving
roads, yeah.
contractor was not the greatest, and there's some problems that's causing a little bit of puddling up higher, and then down by the road, there's quite a puddle, so. we'll
But
be
the
good.
gap to
Right at
the
entrance of
the
the
handicap
funnel.
access was an issue too, right?
Yeah, it was down about an inch or so, but as we come across that, we'll level that.
Level that.
So, yeah, there's a little bit of work to be done there. When we get the final plan, we'll know if it's 100% gonna pay for them, or we need to pay a little bit because of some changes, but the bad workmanship part will be covered by the contractor.
I looked at it, I don't think there's anything except for bad workmanship, to be honest. I don't believe there's anything that we need to necessarily change,
It's a little bit more complicated than that.
perhaps.
And that's my town. report.
Before I move on to the business, I should let people know that Alice Kennedy is not here. She was excused. She is in, I forget whether it's Sweden or Norway, but someplace more exciting than
Sweden
this.
for her PhD
Really?
work, yeah.
Oh,
She's in,
outstanding.
she's in school.
Yeah. Okay. First up, David Tract, Planning Board Chair, Board Appointments. Come up.
Thank you, John. I come tonight seeking clarity on how board appointments are done. I recognize that the select board makes appointments to all boards that are not elected. I don't want to dwell on the situation that occurred in it's either December or January. But it seems that it's changed a little bit since then. I requested a copy of the policy for appointing boards. And I received a link to a select board policy from, I believe, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Which basically restates several RSAs, deals more with the requirements to remove somebody from a board for cause. And it goes into a little bit of how vacancies that occur midterm are filled. This document, quite frankly, does not answer my question. So I'm here to ask what the process is. I can relate to you how I think it happened in this current round of appointments for at least the planning board. So my understanding from the December problem or event was that a advertising or posting of vacancies is put on the town website and perhaps other places for 30 days. People who are interested fill out a form, and the web form then gets distributed, I thought, to board chairs and or staff. I know that in the planning board, I did not get any paperwork on any of the applicants. And you folks chose people, which is, your job, and you're right. But at this point, going into our organizational meeting, I have two people who, to the best of my knowledge, I have very little knowledge of other than their names. I don't know what, if any, experience they have with land use. And I just want to get some clarity as to what the process should be and perhaps react to what you have to tell me.
John, can I jump on this one?
Sure,
So
please do.
So I called both John and Ed because, and this is not a slight to anyone, but I was not totally clear on the process either. So I think what you're raising is something, I think we've done it in a number of different ways, and I think we need to have a documented process flow.
Yes.
So, because I think, I might have opened a can of worms and said, well, what about alternates? Are you allowed to? And then pretty soon everyone was an alternate, and maybe we missed someone and maybe we were fair. And then the web form, we definitely missed somebody who really wanted to be on conservation, and it's hard to unwind that, right? So I think those pieces and figuring out what the flow should be and what the checks are, I'd like to see us I'll come up with something that works a little better. Because my recollection is that they don't go out to the committees for recommendations, because if we did that, then the timeline would be really long. I think, did we say 2 weeks though, not 30 days?
Yes, we talked about it again a month ago or something.
Yeah,
And we did talk about going less than 30 days.
okay.
And I think I forget, I'd have to look back at the minutes to see what we did.
We ended up going about 30 days.
No, we did 30 days for that process, because that was clear, but I'm saying for the minimum, for these in between where you have a little bit less time.
I don't think there was any formal decision,
Right.
but we did talk that a 2-week time frame or something.
Yeah, seemed reasonable to
Yeah,
everybody.
I mean, I know back in December, I did receive a copy of the application. And was kind of surprised that I did not get, or that Rob didn't get anything this time.
Shirley?
I just like to say, as chair of the conservation, I echo exactly what you said. I heard on the recording that two that had been appointed, and I gave them a call and welcomed them. And, one of them said to me, you know, my interest and background and my application, and I said, no, I don't, because I did not receive anything about anybody who was being appointed,
Yeah.
so it is hard not to know their interests and background, especially in like yours is in science and environment. The
I
resources of the town.
think particularly on land use boards where there are legal questions involved. It would be, and from my point of view, I think it takes a good year for people to get up to speed. And I would have liked to have had an opportunity to poll all of my alternates and see if I could convince one of them to apply for a full membership.
I think, so for me, this is in two parts, right? Because we have the regular once a year refill. And then the vacancy, the
Yeah.
unexpected vacancy refill. And so I think one of the things we could do is line up a clear process for the once a year refill, maybe that starts slightly earlier. The reason I say that is if we back up our timeline, that would give an opportunity to remind each of the sitting chairs that if they want to do that activity, they could. Like if we were to calendar it as a regular occurrence. I think in this case, my understanding on the planning board side was the alternates were not.
In this case, they did provide their preference within their
Yeah.
applications. But
Yeah.
that is not your.
But that doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
you
But
shouldn't
that's
get
not
to see it.
David's point.
Yeah, but
No, no.
again, I might have been successful in talking somebody
Right.
into being a full-time member. I might not have. I just, would have liked the opportunity.
Let's keep in mind, we have two different kinds of boards. There are those boards that are elected
Right,
Right,
by the voters, and that is the very strict process.
right.
And then we have these, which are controlled essentially by us,
Mm-hmm.
the select board.
and we're asking them to do.
So we need to simply set a policy.
Yeah, and I think the only difference between the two really is the time frame.
Yeah.
The one in the
Yes.
spring, we know it happens every single spring,
Yeah.
Right,
and we can even say, it starts the Monday after
right.
the voting, the Tuesday voting, and that'll start the clock, and, if you open them up,
Mhm.
people submit applications, the applications are sent to select board staff and board chairs, and then they'll be on the agenda no less than 30 days after they open, or whatever
That's absolutely
the
correct.
timeframe is. So that, and then the other one is basically the exact same thing, except your timeframe's compressed, potentially.
The other one being.
Being if it's in December,
Mhm,
Unexpected vacancy.
right, an unexpected vacancy, a
Right.
resignation, or somebody moves,
mhm.
or something like
I
that.
think an unexpected vacancy would be you call upon the alternate.
Well, you would still have
Still
to
needs to be a-
appoint,
Right.
and yeah, you would still have to
Yeah.
appoint.
Yeah.
It could be an alternate, it could be somebody else. And
I think David's right. You still need to have the process, because, right, the goal is to get the best people who want to do the job, not.
yeah,
I think too, you know, this gets a little further into the weeds, but like, we don't have necessarily committee charges or a makeup, like a stated, you know, we always come across the CIP discussion of should CIP have so
Yeah.
many budget members? I think we should be
Mhm.
talking about it when we don't have people on the table.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be more fair. And I just, and this isn't a slight to anyone, but I felt really uncomfortable having it on the fly and not knowing what was fair to do for people.
Mhm.
I also, you know, want to think about in the global sense, how we are inclusive and how we are allowing more people, who have things to contribute instead of using the same people. And then really talking about like, what's the limit on alternates? Are we gonna have 20 alternates? Because I think really like we kind of duck soup that that alternate process accidentally. And you know, I think it just we've never had such a great turnout either.
Actually, alternates are covered by the RSA.
that's
Not on
correct.
Everything, not
Only on a couple
everything.
boards. Yeah.
So I think that we need on the ones that are not covered by RSA to have an understanding of what makes sense for our town. So that we're not taking, because it's an important thing to have an alternate, but also if you have 5 alternates for a committee they're never gonna get to sit. You know, it's not the middle of the pandemic. I think that's not fair to all of the alternates either. So I think I just kind of see, I think we need to do a relook at this policy and how we do this process.
I think I would appreciate it. I think Shirley would appreciate it,
Yeah.
and perhaps others.
Johnson.
Some,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry.
Just a question, and I'm not sure who this should be directed to, but please correct me if I'm misunderstanding that members of land use boards and committees are supposed to be on only one.
That is not exactly accurate. I think it's allowed by state statute. And I know, I'm not sure if it was a formal policy or an informal policy several years ago, where it was decided that you could not serve on zoning and planning simultaneously. But state statute does allow it. There is a bill that I believe has passed the Senate, it passed the House, that requires recusal if you are sitting on both boards for the same applicant or the same appeal. Which seems perfectly reasonable to me and also solves the problem of towns which may not have enough volunteers to fill both boards. And that was a bit of legislation that I helped work on this past year.
And John,
When-
that
when
dates
I
back
was-
to you and me.
Pardon?
That dates back, I think it's an informal policy, but that dates back to you, me and Meredith. I think we stopped putting people on both planning and ZBA.
I would recommend that we don't
Yeah.
unless we get to a point where we don't have.
When I was
people.
first elected selectman, I'd already been elected to the ZBA, and I became the selectman's representative to the planning board. My recollection is the town manager looked into that and said that's perfectly legal.
Yeah,
It is,
Yep.
definitely.
So you can be on both boards.
But it's
Yeah.
not the sound in terms of an operating sense, so maybe we could clarify, that's another opportunity for clarity.
Sir,
I think also, you know, I was an alternate on ZBA. And I kind of felt like a second-class citizen, you know, you sit there and nobody pays any attention. I think you have to have the alternates participate so they can learn. Otherwise, and it makes it interesting for them to come. But you just don't have them sitting there, like, okay, put me in, coach, they
Yeah,
can't vote. That's fine, but I think having them participate in discussions is a very important thing. That way you'll keep them interested and in. I think that has to be something. I don't know if it's a rule that you would have or, whatever, but I think that's really important. That's how you keep alternates
I
around.
don't believe there's any RSA that prohibits an alternate from, for example, sitting at the table and with the chair's permission, speaking.
Well, that's the problem. You got it
It
right
is-
there.
okay.
If you're
It
an
is chair
alternate,
dependent from my understanding of the RSA.
if you're there, you should be allowed to participate and just not vote. You should have, I think, you should have the same rights as the people that are there. Because you're all kind of at your permission on those boards. So just thought.
can I respond? On the planning board, that's the way I have run it as long as I've been chair. The alternates sit at the table. They are encouraged to participate because that's how they learn. The only thing that they can't do is vote unless they are elevated due to the absence of someone else. So, I agree 100% that you've got to keep your alternates interested, occupied, and the way to do that is to offer them the opportunity to sit at the table and to participate as an equal member in all of the discussion and the deliberation, and they can ask questions, but they just can't vote.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna write anything, if there's any policy, that ought to be part of the policy. So the chairman is pushed to keep, like you say, people sitting there. I
Yeah.
think it'll make it easier to get alternates.
I think that is in the planning board's rules of procedure,
Mhm.
but
Whatever, I think that has to be one.
yeah,
It is, and I think it's good, and I agree. I think the challenge is, once boards are formed, they, at that point, we can't control what they do, nor do we want to.
As long as the
And
board,
especially the ZBA, which is an elected board, they
Yeah.
are wholly independent of the select board, and we can, provide best practices, but that's not something that's under control, certainly not part of the application process.
as long as the boards are adhering to the standards of
Correct.
the state RSA's.
Right.
yeah,
Just looking at this one sentence here. The chairman of the local land use board may designate an alternate member of the board to fill the vacancy temporarily until a vacancy is filled in the manner set forth in RSA 673:12, paragraph 1 or 2. Well, there you go. I mean, the chairman has quite a bit of latitude,
yeah,
as long as you maintain adherence to state RSA.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think one other item, as we're talking about alternates that, really spoke to me recently was that with the advent of COVID, we learned to do this hybrid format, which I think is very valuable. But when we have a person who is an alternate, who comes in person and, it's not the case for every board, right? Like it doesn't work for select board, but I'm gonna pick on conservation since I'm on it. So we have a person online who is a full member who does not choose for one reason or another to come in person. To me, I feel like as a town, we should have some kind of written policy, as part of this on seating the alternate who came to the table. I think, we don't have a lot of attendance policies here, other than you just didn't show. We don't interview people to see why they aren't here, or whether they just didn't feel like coming across town. So, but I think if the alternate is here in person, I feel like we should be seating them.
I would tend to agree with that, that there is, after all, no requirement that we provide the service.
Mhm.
The basic rule is you come in person to contribute, and we offer this as something additional. So we could just shut it off, and I'd be all in favor of it.
I mean, I think they could still participate, but also, I don't know, and we'd have to do some research. What about it would eliminate the need for a roll call too, I'm
Mhm.
thinking. And those take a long time when you have somebody who doesn't come online, who comes online regularly, because really the spirit of this is that we're supposed to be here together working.
So,
Sir,
yeah, so my comment there would be that an in-person policy, preference policy, not a requirement, preference, would discourage a certain, like, we certainly have volunteers who say go to Florida or some other place for the winter.
Yeah.
And I'd hate to discourage their participation because for that 3-month period, they would not be, be able to fulfill their full duties and those are still, at least in my experience, they do a good job of participating within the meetings. I think that would be the risk there.
I guess you're convincing me on that issue.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, there is another ruling, and this is state, anyone who misses 4 absences, consecutive absences unexcused is automatically removed from a board.
I thought it was 3, John.
I think that if you go through that document, I don't think that applies to every
I
board.
think that's just the budget.
Well, I know it applies to budget.
At least that was my read of it.
It applies to the point of this to land use boards also.
Okay.
To all of them?
Just reading what I
Okay.
have here from the state.
I think the key word there too is unexcused.
Applies to conservation.
Yeah.
Right, you can be excused
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
let the chair know.
I want people to be able to travel, but I think we are at risk of having some people who are primarily not present. We have that on
Okay.
conservation. So I think we need to figure out how,
Yeah.
when we have people, I've been toying with, do I come to you guys and say, I'd like to give up my voting seat and be an alternate to allow some of these, because right now we're causing it to have pretty much every single meeting be a roll call for conservation. And we got out at almost 10 o'clock at night. And at some point or another, it's a choice to not be present. And if we don't make it clear in our policies, the expectation is, I get it. People go out of town. I have family lives in Florida too. But at some point, I think we need to prioritize the people who spend time here, in the room. That's just and I
think
don't
it
know
might
how to
be
do
fair
it.
to ask that question of an applicant to the board, particularly a landlord. But any of the boards, whether they will be willing to attend the majority of the meetings. And if they're not willing to commit to that process, then they should not be necessarily considered for appointment. I think that's a fair point.
I agree with Katie. It's a tricky one to write up.
Yeah, I
think.
just don't know how to do it, to be
Yeah.
honest, and I'm trying to be fair because I think you all know, I don't care which room I'm in, I can participate in it. And so I'm very in favor of having this hybrid format and being inclusive, but it's that tricky piece of how do you balance it out and be fair to the other people.
I think the New Hampshire Municipal Association has something written up
Oh,
that
yeah?
addresses this, and I can look it up.
That would be.
Yeah, that would be
That
one.
would be wonderful.
My recollection is it's supposed to be a legitimate excuse for not being at the meeting, such as you're out of town on business or you're
Lebanon
out of
has
town.
something.
You're not just home because it's more convenient and comfortable.
That would give us a starting point. That'd be great.
I'm not saying we want to run like Lebanon, they're a city, but they do have some kind of requirement as well. We could just take a brief look at theirs.
Yeah, they follow the same thing. Kind of what we had to do through COVID is they have to say why they're gone. And it has to be a really legit reason why they're not here in person. And then they also have to do who else is there in the room with them, those types of things.
So that information put on the original application so that they would know about that upfront might, if you will, allow some of the filtering process to occur at that point. Eric had a good point that we certainly do not want to interfere with how the boards are run. But I do agree with Bob's point about somehow encouraging board chairs to consider the involvement of alternates. I think that's fair. I understand that we should not interfere at all in boards But it would be nice if somehow they could be encouraged. A la planning has a certain policy. But it would be nice if the rest of the boards were encouraged to incorporate their alternates in the discussion and seat them at the table and let them speak their minds. I think that's a good thing.
It's timely also because, yeah, 2019 was the last time we did this.
Yep.
Katie was there, I was there, and Meredith Smith was there. You know, it's good yes.
The current board chair for ZBA, I will say, was very inclusive of me participating. Now, I didn't like all his decisions, but I
Yeah.
enjoyed participating with him and he was very open to it. Prior to that, it was if and sort of when, felt like it. So I think the boards of elected can be kind of pushed towards letting people participate. I think you get a whole lot more people involved too.
David,
And I would add to that, elected boards or committees, before the election should be offered and questioned whether they intend to participate with the majority of those meetings. And that can allow people to make appropriate decisions when they vote.
Good point.
can I have your name, please? I don't know.
Bridget.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize.
I also think education too. So you have people who may not have ever sat in these roles before, who are now sitting in this role.
Yeah.
They know exactly all those pieces, you know, so it's all gonna come down once this is created, is making sure that people have it and maybe have a brief education of this is what's happening. This is what we'd love to see.
I'm thinking about when I first started in town service, I was an alternate to the planning board. And the other alternate was Kurt. And we always tried to hustle there to be the first one in because we're most likely to get chosen. And finally I said, nah, I think I'll just run for something.
Do we action this back to the town manager's office for some further massaging information?
That sound reasonable?
Yeah, I'll do a little research and draft something to start off with.
Thank you.
Good discussion.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, David.
You're very welcome. I thank you for your time. I'm wondering if I might take maybe 5 minutes of your time on a legislative question.
Okay,
When
that terrifies me,
good,
mentioning the legislature.
when I first was elected, I was told, vote your conscience, vote your district, vote your party. On the issue of many bills that have gone and are going through the legislature this year that have to do with housing and zoning, I know what my conscience tells me. I know what my party tells me, but I don't know what you folks who are the governing body of my district are going to tell me. From my point of view, a lot of these bills give you two alternatives. One is give up local control of zoning in favor of statewide zoning, which may or may not increase the housing stock within the state. I'd like to know where the board stands.
My position, it's the individual law. I mean, some seem a case of radical overkill that will reduce the required size of lots, reduce the size of road frontage, increase the number of units that can be on a lot. To the point where I think it would be reasonable to at least worry that those rulings could change the character of the town and lose some of its rural character. I think my goal would be, can we increase the housing stock while maintaining the essential character of the town?
I would say that we can, but we need to do it here in Enfield, not down in Concord.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Yes.
that's.
I lean completely on the side of local control. I think what's good for Berlin and good for Lebanon and good for Wolfboro are very, very different things. And I think it's too individual to allow the state, and I mean, gosh, we can't even get them to put a crosswalk in a timely fashion, so. No, I mean, for real though,
No.
they just, this one size fits all, I think the big danger of not having local control in addition to the character issue is that it could be really, really expensive for us, because if you start getting clusters of housing in some weird place because we have a lake, and it causes us to really need us to extend the sewer again.
Yeah.
That's a big one for me. I think we know how expensive it is to do some of these infrastructure pieces, and I don't want to be ham-fisted into doing something that the state thinks is generally a good idea with no funding, because they are not going to pay for it.
I think that as you run across proposals, unfortunately, it may be a little bit incumbent on you to inform us as members of the board that these things have come to light. While I think we're all up to speed, or try to be up to speed with what's happening in Concord, there may be something that you see that is a particular ilk that needs, for you, a little guidance beyond conscience, for example, and does blend into a town opinion. I don't think, given the timeliness of these proposals, and within the time that the House meets, that we're able to make it something that's an agenda item. Therefore, I think it's something that's incumbent on you to correspond to us as individuals, ask for an opinion, ask us to become perhaps educated in what the proposal may be, and express to you our thoughts, how we think, so that you have a little further guidance on how to proceed in your own milieu. But I don't think it's something that you can bring to a board, because when we're only meeting twice a month, there's just no way that we can add something to the agenda. But I would have to say, I would encourage you, of course, to correspond to us and let us know what is on the docket that we could perhaps express an opinion of.
It's late in the legislative season, but I could certainly.
But there was certainly a lot of
Try-
idiosyncrasies that were proposed this year that,
Yes,
and I'm using a kind word,
you are.
that, deserve to either be considered or die on the vine.
Ed,
I have a couple things. One, towards your answer, I've actually purposely stayed away from some of the land use stuff with you, thinking you knew what we needed to do, but, I would agree. I think the local control thing's a big consideration to have.
Yep.
I did write Senator Prentice today on 2 land use bills that they're gonna be voting on. One was, and I'm sure you've seen it because it came from the House, but mobile homes being allowed in every residential district. And it was just an easy one to say, though I may agree that in most districts it should fit. We all know that if we look at our own town, they don't really belong in every district. So having the state weigh in and make these blanket mandates for the state, I don't think are good for anybody.
I don't think
They
so.
may help with some housing, but I mean, and the same one with the other one where residential must be allowed in all commercial areas. There's some commercial areas they shouldn't be in.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of the ones that we have that we don't let them in that, maybe they could fit in there. So
And that's
that's.
brings
local
it back
control.
to, we know what works at Enfield.
Yeah.
And
So
one
that-
size does not fit all.
That would be my vote there. And
Okay.
then I think in next year, maybe the January timeframe. Maybe from.
We'll start
We
communicating
can
better.
have a little, here's what we're seeing on the table. What do you think?
Mhm.
And we can have this local control discussion and it gives you a little bit of guidance because the legislature does move fast and you're extremely busy.
Yeah.
And may not have time to make those calls all the time. And then.
Yep.
Same thing, corresponding back and forth too. If you go, hey, this one's out there a couple of weeks, can we get it on a select board agenda to talk about? We'll get it on there.
Mhm.
And-
Oh, yeah, I mean, if it's something that you felt the support of this board could in any way help, then by all means, without hesitation.
And we'll
Mhm.
continue to talk. I write quite a few letters to David and Senator Prentice throughout the legislative workings on things that I know which way the town looking are going. Local control is a lot of it. but
Yeah.
Let's do that.
The NHMA
Also the,
updates we get, yeah,
The what?
the NHMA updates.
Yes.
So if
yes.
I see
Those are
something,
crucial.
Those are very important.
And
I
they're
sent-
all posted on our town website, aren't they?
no,
They're
we
not
get
on the
them.
website.
I get it on my
Get
email.
'em.
We just get them.
Mhm. And I tend to personally, if I see something that will affect us as a town, I send in testimony online, relatively regularly. So you might not see it for your committee, but
Yeah.
I do send testimony and I'll make very sure that I send you my.
And same thing
David.
for the board. That's something we want to talk.
I don't know the correct medium for doing so, but it doesn't have to just be town officials. It could also be general public, and I don't know how you do that.
I get-
Serves or
I
something.
get emails.
Yeah, but actively saying zoning stuff is coming up, including this. I mean, general subject matter, and seeking input from the community members.
I'll have to work on that.
I think you do have a
There
mechanism.
are
in
only so
place
many
that-
hours in the day, but we do what we can.
Yeah.
And that's
You
surely.
came to tell us something and we're gonna throw it right back at you.
All right.
Thank you.
I thank you guys for your time. I've taken up an awful lot of your meeting.
No.
And I have to be home by 7.
Good stuff.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Shirley, had your hand up.
Thank you, David.
You can list the bill and the committee members and their emails so that people can write to them directly.
The testimony piece is click,
Okay,
It's pretty easy.
yeah, super easy.
next up. Another wildly exciting topic, finance policy, second review. Very important.
So there's a few things in here that I changed from the last meeting. Most of it was your guys' comments. On the introduction area, I added in bold that sentence to ensure financial security, only authorized methods and approved levels of payment. And, well, approved's in there too much, I need to think
Okay.
that. An approved level of payment in this policy will be allowed.
Right. Yeah.
So I added that there.
Is it methods of payment?
I get the method.
Because if you have a credit card, you obviously have been given permission to use it, so.
Thinking of which, I guess you've just inserted a section on municipal credit card use
Yeah,
that we hadn't seen.
That's one thing that I added.
Okay.
What page is that on?
Well, it was in our package. No page numbers. AI doesn't number, they just assume.
Oh, this isn't all AI. You keep saying that.
No, it just, on the bottom,
Pieces of it. was.
granted, but on the bottom, it says AI assisted, you know.
Yeah, but they didn't write the whole thing.
You
No, I'm sure they
put, you put all of the documents in and you ask it to format it for you.
I'm aware.
It says unified formatting.
So, and then on the cybercrime. One, section 5. As we stated, EFT vendor shall. Or no EFT to a vendor shall exceed 125. I added the or an amount that aligns with the town's current cybersecurity insurance coverage, whichever is less.
That makes me really happy.
And then on part B, we added that paper checks need to be signed with dual signatures. If it's over that amount.
And that wasn't a problem. You can just sign, when we talked about it, all of a sudden I was like, you can actually just sign on the same line.
We'll figure it out. I'm gonna try not to be a signer. I was talking to John today. I have too much authority to approve.
Mhm.
payments, that I shouldn't be the one authorizing the payment as well. So we will work, so Elisa can sign and probably the two treasurers, and then I'm the one that usually approve the most expenditures, so trying to keep some checks and balances in there.
Do you have a grant of approval rubrics like that we, or could we have, I should say? So that you have a chart that's like, these are this and these are the fallback signs, so it's very clear somewhere in case someone's like, hey, we've run out of options A, B, and C. What do we do next? So that's documented, like a lot, like larger companies have, like, if you're this level employee, you have X number of dollars grant of approval.
Yeah, that's in the purchasing policy.
So, but in terms of the check signing, same thing.
We don't have many people that can, we're not big enough for that. We have 3 in the whole town, and that's because you need 2, and if one person's on vacation, and nobody else in town has authority. Right now, only the treasurer has authority, so that's.
I have a couple of comments, for the finance policies, that I'd like to briefly go through if I could, and I'm gonna give you my copy of these notes when I'm done, so you don't have to necessarily, write it all down. Under the introduction, I'd like to see the more formal, administration interpretation application of the policy paragraph be inserted as we had it written under the fraud policy. It indicates the annual review, et cetera, but it's a little more detailed than that one line that says these policies will be reviewed annually by the select board. It indicates a little more depth of, collaboration with the select board and the town manager in reviewing on an annual basis these policies, so I put that in there. I'd also like to note that that particular introduction should probably make reference to the RSA 41:9, which is referenced later under the fraud policy, but actually only applies to the select board. It doesn't actually apply to anyone beyond the select board. So putting it in the introduction page may be the right place for it.
Help me out, since it's an intro, that's a very, why would we put it there?
Well, it has to, I'm just suggesting it be somewhere within the policies, and it doesn't apply to the fraud policy, because it is strictly a select board, RSA.
And where'd you get it from?
Off the state. It's made reference in the fraud policy, but it doesn't seem to fit there. If you look in the fraud policy, it's listed there, but doesn't really seem to fit there.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, the one thing I would caution would be restating state law in a policy. You should almost never do that.
Well, I didn't restate it. I'm not restating it at all. It's made reference in the fraud policy, per RSA, per RSA 41:9, but it doesn't seem to fit there. That's all I'm suggesting. You can look at it.
why would we have approved a policy where it didn't fit previously?
It wasn't there before.
It's new.
Under, capital reserve policy, a couple of minor points. Under the target fund balance, where it says capital reserve fund shall maintain balances that meet the following minimum thresholds. I'd like to see some reference to, as a general rule, subject to the select board.
Which line are you on?
Line 3, target fund balances. And it said, according to those thresholds, but I'd like to see some reference that allows this recognition of the select board to have some input to target fund balances.
I think you're missing the prior page that says authority.
No,
Yep, it says
I'm
authority.
not missing the prior page.
Oh, okay. So it says capital reserve policy, Roman numeral 2, authority. And then it says the last sentence is the select board is responsible for the oversight, amendment, and implementation of this policy.
Yeah, I saw that.
We don't,
I'll admit, I may be repetitive on that point.
yeah, I don't think we need it.
Point number 4 makes reference to something that I have not seen, and that is, again, quarterly reports from the trustees of trust funds. Haven't seen them.
I don't think we can make them, but we want them.
Well, if it's in the policy, and that's not new.
Well, they don't report to us.
No, but if it's in the policy
But
as a town policy,
they're an elected board.
Yeah.
And again, we can't control them. We can, we're essentially through this policy requesting them, but we cannot force
well, then,
their behavior.
okay, I'll go along with that. Perhaps we can put in the word request.
I think it's fine as is. They know what it is and they can, choose to act on it or not. And this is what the select board would like to see, and that's what this is saying.
Okay. Under the cybercrime and phishing prevention policy, I actually thought that the policy that you wrote a few weeks ago, November, actually, was well written.
It is,
Um,
word for word.
this is not word for word. This actually is a kind of a little different version, but I thought the one you wrote on 11/18 was quite good, quite good.
That thing.
It's
Can
not,
you-
unfortunately.
Give us.
But I'm
an
not gonna
example
go,
of
I'm
what's
not gonna be
working.
too elaborate about it. I just wanna point out that it's not quite the same thing, and at some point, perhaps you could look at it and see what your thoughts are with regard to the difference. I thought the one that you wrote on 11/18 was quite good. At that time, you called it the new addition to fraud
What
policy.
do you think is different?
Yeah, that's where I'm.
There are different lines in it that I felt were emphasized.
Can you give an example
Um,
so that we know what you're referencing?
there was internet here.
I've got things, I'll have to look at some stuff.
Well, I don't have it in front of the original one. I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately.
We had many iterations, but,
Well, the iteration which you wrote and we accepted on 11/18, as I read it as compared to this one, I thought that the 11/18 one read a little bit better to my eye.
Should just be a format change.
I think there was a greater, I found it now. I think it was a greater emphasis, perhaps it was the formatting, but perhaps also it was the greater emphasis to the face-to-face communication and signature obtaining. It made more reference to the need for email correspondence, et cetera, as a part of that policy. I'm gonna let you compare the two, and if you feel that it's adequately represented in this newly adapted policy, then so be it.
okay. I
Should
need help
definitely
on the
come
web-
to that under 3.
I need help on the webpage, I guess. It's under ordinances, policies and regulations.
So it's under new addition to fraud policy, which was, we adopted on November 18th.
No, it's not under N for new. That's why I'm saying. I'm using an actual computer on the website. That's why I'm asking for help from them. Because I want to look at the actual copy and not a piece of paper. Am I missing it?
I haven't looked on the website.
Okay.
I don't.
Maybe
Maybe
it's-
have been incorporated into the fraud policy, so the fraud policy.
Okay, did it get updated on
No,
the?
it's separate.
I thought it was an addition to the fraud policy.
But it's not on the one on the website.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
have to say it may not have got posted.
okay, can you send around the latest copy, the one that we approved and Luke must have signed? I'm sure that up.
Anyway, I'll move on. I don't mean to belabor us on that. Under the debt management policy, I had a question actually that I'm trusting you'll probably prove me wrong in my reading of it. Under debt ratios, the following financial thresholds shall guide decisions regarding the issuance of new debt. It says the town's outstanding debt, including new and existing obligations, shall not exceed 0.4% of the town's net asset valuation. I assume then that that's current valuation. Town's net assessed valuation.
Yeah, it would be the most current.
And off the top of your head, do you recall what that number is? Because I seem to think of it as being about, 950 million and change.
I'd have to look it up.
Well, the reason I say that is if it's about that, then we're limited to a debt of $4 million. Which obviously doesn't work. The second one is kind of a similar question. Total indebtedness per capita should not exceed $500. At current population, that's $2,250,000. We rather exceed that. The third one, total annual debt service principal and interest shall not exceed 5% of the town's total operating budget. At the total operating budget, we presently are proposing of somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million. That would be $500,000. So I think those ratios don't work anymore. That's all.
So we review.
Although I want to say, I think we need to talk about why before we consider making any changes, because
I'm not suggesting any changes. I'm just asking for it to look at it.
no, because those are supposed to be a litmus test for what we're doing for projects and what our financial debt load that we potentially could handle. And if we want to change them, or we should really be looking at it, though. It should be something we look at each
Yeah.
time. My understanding is I had asked in the past when we approached these projects, before you ever came on board, if we would be within our policy if we took these the projects on. So, yeah. Because we should not be loading ourselves with a ton of debt.
I'll skip over to fraud. I agree. It's just something, I think it's something that needs to be updated, but I'm not gonna say to what levels or any of that. I just think it's something to look at. Under fraud policy, I had a question whether under investigation responsibilities, 1, 2, 3, et cetera, should there be something in there that, someone who reports the fraud is protected by a certain level of anonymity? Is that appropriate? To protect a person who might turn in fraud by keeping them anonymous?
We'd have to look at the whistleblower laws. That would be,
I mean, you have a confidentiality
I
section.
mean, I'm wondering whether we ought to protect an employee who,
it gets really sticky in the
Okay.
public sector. We can't just say, oh,
Okay.
we'll keep you confidential, because there's
Mhm.
right to public information
Oh,
laws, and
I'm reading it coming from the private sector, so I'm just throwing that out there and suggesting that,
we can look into.
perhaps there's a level of anonymity which could be extended. Okay. Under, section 7, number 5, where it says theft of any town asset, I'd like to suggest that it be theft or unauthorized use of any town asset.
Is youth fraud.
I believe it is fraud.
I don't know though, I'm just,
Fraud is defined here as intentional misrepresentation or omission for personal gain. And the use of town equipment would certainly qualify
don't
as
think it-
fraud.
I don't think it falls within the confines of this policy. It is in our personnel policy.
That should suffice.
Okay, that's fine. The last one, which was the authority, line 10, Roman numeral. This policy is adopted by the Enfield Select Board in accordance with RSA 41:9. That was the one I was referring to, which, this policy, RSA 41:9 really doesn't address any level of employee fraud. It's, as I read it, it addresses, behavior of select board,
Okay, I'll look at it.
and that's fine.
I think that really, I'll look at it again. That should just be giving the select board authority to write this policy.
Fair enough.
You're supposed to.
it's the
state-
financial duties policy.
Investment policy, paragraph 2, scope. It says, I won't read the whole paragraph, but it starts to say these include but are not limited to, and then it lists certain funds. I am suggesting that it might also say, financial assets are accounted for in the town annual financial report and include the list of those funds. But that may be redundant from what it says in the first line, but that's a note that I had made on it. Under authority and process, paragraph A of duties of the town treasurer. Authority and process, town treasurer shall have custody of all municipal funds and disperse them only as authorized. But it almost looks like something's missing. Authorized by whom?
Yeah, I think that's just from the last.
Oh, I agree. Yes, I think it is. And I checked it. It doesn't say anything further on the last one either. It just seemed to be, something that is missing because it says only as authorized, but then it doesn't say who's authorized.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna be dependent on the type of expenditure.
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge there.
Now, the last one on that same paragraph, however, and that sort of addresses Eric's, mention before of the, trustees being elected officials. The treasurer is requested to submit quarterly reconciliation and reports. Again, I've never seen such a thing. And that treasurer is now an employee of the town, the current system.
It's
They're
a different,
appointed. They're not an employee.
you're thinking,
Well, they're contract employee.
no, you're thinking two different individuals.
Oh, I know. I very much know, but I'm speaking of different individuals.
So, but the treasurer
But
of,
the information is,
so you wanted to say treasurer of trustee of trust fund?
no,
It's not trustee
it's-
of trust funds at all.
Okay,
it's the town treasurer.
one,
It's not, this has nothing to do with treasurer trust funds. I, listened to and heard what Eric had to say, concerned about dictating to an elected official such as the trustees of trust funds. This is the case of the town treasurer, who's not an elected position. And it says submit quarterly reconciliation
Beyond that,
and
we're-
reports.
We're gonna look at going more often.
Yeah.
We're working on,
That's all I'm
we're
suggesting.
working
is
on a monthly.
That position now is no longer an elected position.
which, I'm sorry, I may be in a different section than you are, where are you?
Author, authority and process under duties of the town treasurer.
Okay. I was down further, which is under section Roman, yeah, if you could just give me the Roman numerals when you're going, so Roman numeral 6, that's
So
where,
Roman numeral 5, duties of the town treasurer, authority and process, first paragraph, and the
And she's,
bottom bullet point right there.
he does submit monthly record.
Submit quarterly reconciliations and reports.
Yeah,
We
he
do that every
submits
month.
monthly.
I think monthly is the very,
That exceeds quarterly, certainly.
I would rather.
So, and we will be working on that to increase the monthly reports that come to the select board as well.
The next paragraph says, the treasurer shall develop and maintain written investment procedures consistent with this policy. These procedures shall be reviewed by the select board and include delegated authority and internal controls. I've never seen such procedures. And I don't know who it's referring to in terms of delegated authority or internal controls. I've never seen anything like that. And again, under reporting, it says submit quarterly investment reports, which is a repeat of what's actually up above. And then it also says submit an annual report within 60 days after the fiscal year with detailed investment performance.
I think this is intertwining the two.
It is, isn't it though? Yes. But it doesn't, because under the status that we've placed the town treasurer now, it does not interfere necessarily with the elected role of the trustee.
No, but she doesn't really do investments at all. The only thing we've invested since I've been here, really, she has savings accounts and stuff, and then we've done a couple CDs with the loan proceeds that we got, but other than that.
Should we? So I think there's two things going here. One is that, in a lot of the subsections of this finance policy, the authority is separate from the process. So I'm wondering if we should break the authority from the process, so we don't end up with a duplicate within that subsection. And then, go back and take a look at defining, because there's statutory requirements of things that are invested by the trustees, and then there are operating funds, which we have the treasurer of the town do. So do we just somehow explain in this that operate, like distinguish between operating funds and statutory? I don't know how to do it exactly, but just to make it a little more clear.
Under authority and process, it makes reference to the trustees of trust funds. It says trust fund and capital reserve fund management is delegated to the trustee of trust funds. I would at this point, and this is aside from this particular document, because it talks about their terms, 3-year terms, et cetera, make reference that we do not have 3 members on that board, and we need to consider
I
that.
wouldn't put that in policy.
I'm not putting in a policy. I'm simply, this is an opportunity because it makes reference to that board, mentioning that we're a few months past the election and we do not have 3 members of the trustees.
Did someone accept?
I
There were
have to double
write-ins.
check. There were write-ins. I believe one person was still thinking on it. They wanted to accept.
And that was, and speaking of, that was my understanding as well. We need to make a decision because the Board of Selectmen is requested to fill that if it's an empty position, according to the RSA.
Good point.
There was a mention in the original one, that the treasurer is requested to require vouchers or other evidence, and that line is no longer here, but you know, that may not be necessary. I'm sure you have a protocol for the treasurer requesting, information. It says in the previous one, the original one, it said that the treasurer was required to request a voucher or other evidence of request for funds from the authorization authority. That line is gone from the new policy, but I'm sure there's a procedure that you have involved there. Overall, I just felt there was some good things in the original, policy, the original investment policy. I guess I would ask you to simply look one more time, if you would, please, and compare the original policy of, 2018 is when it began, then approved every year or so since then. I just asked you to one more time, compare that to this newer policy, and if you feel comfortable that things have been covered, then so be it. Into the post-issuance tax compliant policy, I've only got a couple of things here. Down on, Roman numeral 4, it says policy statements. And then in the last line, it makes reference to an exhibit A. That's not here. And then in the following paragraph, it says the same thing. Roman numeral 5, implementing and monitoring the procedures outlined in exhibit A. And it's not here.
Just asking a question in terms of exhibits. We've talked in the past because sometimes exhibits have information that changes and are an operating item. So if it is an operating item, figuring out some language that we're referring to an operating document so that we don't have to come back and reapprove this for you to change the operating document.
And that may be fine. It could say that rather than make reference that it should be attached.
Yeah, I don't know in this case.
It's not. Yeah, I don't know what it is, so I can't, I don't want to say that it's,
Get to the cybersecurity one.
Yeah.
I quickly found was not the signed version.
the only other thing is that the original policy, post-issuance tax compliance, et cetera, was far more extensive and several pages longer than this one. And I just wonder, in reading through it, it's quite convoluted, but very detailed. And I just wonder if we have properly covered it through this new policy. There's at least 4 pages of additional policy in the original policy that are not here. And by my reading, it is pretty difficult to say it's really covered by this new policy.
I'll look at it again.
If you could, that'd be great.
Thought I covered everything.
Appreciate it. Well, there's so, as I said, there's 4 pages more.
Yeah, there was a lot of duplication and
Agreed, and that could very well be. And if you're comfortable with it, I think that's fine. I just want to point out that the 4 pages is a lot to be condensed into, it's really not even condensed, it's simply not really mentioned.
I think some of it is that had the whole whereas section. And so realigning it into a format, a uniform format.
I'll read through it again and make sure we covered everything.
Purchasing policy, pretty good, except there's a reference under purchases of $10,000 or more. It's 2/3 of the way down the page. It's, the header of that particular section says commodity and equipment purchases. And then in that paragraph underneath it, where it says purchases under 5, purchases 5 to 9, purchases of $10,000 or more. Since that in the cover headline says equipment purchases, the purchases of $10,000 or more should make reference to having gone through CIP. And on the last page of that particular document,
Just hang on, I'm trying to think on that one. Not everything we purchase for $10,000
Just a
goes through
capital
DOT.
expenditure, not,
I only make reference to it because it says equipment.
You could say and or, but, because
So
like
you
if
could
we,
eliminate the word equipment from that, but then you wouldn't have a specific policy on that. Or you could incorporate a reference to the CIP for $10,000,
I
either
think
one.
you don't need to, because we separately do that for CIP.
We do, but this particular policy would ignore CIP because it doesn't, under purchases of $10,000 or more for equipment, doesn't mention CIP.
I don't think it excludes our practices for CIP, but maybe we can incorporate it in a way.
That's all I'm suggesting is a reference to CIP.
Because, if we contract for a service, that is certainly not CIP.
But I'm not referring to service. It particularly says equipment purchases right at the header.
Well, it says commodity and maybe these need to say and or something, because commodities obviously are not the same.
Then the last thing on that particular grouping, awarding to higher cost vendors, which is a triple asterisk thing. So it's the definition of triple asterisks. And it has 4 bullet points. And then at the last bullet point, it says select board concurrence is required. I'm suggesting that those 3 asterisks apply to that entire section of awarding to higher cost vendors. Since we have looked at as a board, those exact bullet points, all of them, whenever we have been asked to award to a higher cost vendor. It's not just the last one of 25,000 or more. We've looked at all of those things.
I would suggest that we don't use asterisks and say C subsection.
Yeah, they're not my favorite either.
Name, that's just because it's such a long policy.
And there's 2 asterisk groupings. There's the double asterisk and the triple
So
asterisk.
say C that purchasing
Yeah,
policy,
it's a tough one.
subsection, blah, blah, blah.
Last thing, I'll be done. I'm sorry to bore everyone. Undesignated fund balance policy. Last line above, or last section above, Roman numeral 8. In the original policy, it has a line about asking the town manager for an assessment of unfunded balance in the fall, which I happen to think is a great thing for the town manager to come to the board in the fall and say, here's my thought as to what the unfunded balance is. Here's my thought as perhaps it's how you might consider down the line. That's in the original policy, but that assessment request is not in the new policy. And I'm sorry to throw everyone off on that, but
It's already thoroughly done.
I think your policies are great. I really like the idea that we're consolidating them. Oh, I did have a question whether we should be including authorization signatures as part of this policy, but it might not be the appropriate thing. We did a policy where we initiated, where we initialed authorized signatures. But I didn't know if that should be in.
I don't know what that, what do you?
Delegation of deposit authority, excuse me. We have a delegation of deposit authority with names of town treasurer, town manager,
Yeah, that's.
town
not a-
clerk, et cetera.
That's not a,
That's not our.
Yeah, that's not really a, it is ours, I think.
it's something
No,
we
it's
do.
not. It's an operating policy. It's not a select board policy.
It's not a policy. It comes to the
We
select
signed it.
board to designate.
I didn't.
We signed it. I don't have the signed copy, I'll grant you, but we signed it. And I didn't know if that should
I
be,
looked at that and just decided that
that's fine.
that wasn't a policy, that's. a
That should be an
designation.
operating. one.
Yeah, that's, okay.
It comes to you guys to designate, but it's not a policy. It's a
Okay.
designation.
That's, I didn't know if that should be considered possible. Whitney, could I ask you to pass that on to Ed, please? Thanks very much.
I just, as a general, just to make things more confusing, because I know we're trying to figure out what the contents are, just some housekeeping. I'd like to align the section naming conventions for each section, and then put them in, the same order, basically. So if we have authority, purpose, and do that. And then the prior adoption info at the bottom of each section from the previous adoptions to maintain them, to capture some historic data, because because we're combining them, it's gonna be a little bit odd, but I don't know where else we could capture it, unless we capture it at the very, very end and name each subsection and when it was previously authorized, so that it's easy to go back and refer.
I'm sorry to bore our audience, but, you know,
You're reading it.
Yeah.
I had one, on, the exhibit A thing that you brought up earlier on the tax exempt policy, or, I was noticing, trying to follow along online on some of the policies that the resolution got included, the resolution to pass the policies got included, in a bunch of the policy documents online. And I was wondering, the resolution refers to the policy as exhibit A. Is that what might have happened?
that's quite possible.
The where.
That's why I picked up on that and said it looked like it was missing, so I just was asking Ed if he felt that it was a crucial item that needed to be included or not.
Are you going to have, I'm sorry,
No, that's it.
are you going to have the, auditors take a look at this? Cause I was just wondering, you know, that you don't want them coming back through and making changes to the policy because, you know, their job, and I don't know whether they've done it before properly, but their job is to make recommendations relative to internal controls.
Right.
You know, because when I was an auditor, we loved internal controls because that's how we made our money, you know, it costs. And then come in and make changes. Maybe after you're all done, you might want to think about
That's
handing
probably
it
a
over
thought.
to them, just to.
On the new
give them-
RFP, we will. Our
Mhm.
current auditors, it strictly says in their contract that they will not make recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's been a point of something we've talked about.
Yeah, it is.
Dan and I keep raising,
That's pretty.
Dan Piley and I, yeah, no,
I think the new
Yeah.
one needs to.
Maybe you need new auditors.
we are gonna have to.
Okay, folks, I think it's time to take the bull by the horns and move on to the next topic, if there are no disagreements to that. Thank you. Next up, we have building discussion for 19 Main Street and 18 Depot Street. We might touch upon Friends of Mascoma Food Pantry in that discussion. Ed, you wanna set this up for us?
Sure, last time we had a discussion, it was a while ago, but we had talked, if I remember right, there was consensus between the board to sell Union Street. I don't know that we ever got to the point of making a formal motion of that, and I don't think we need to at this time, as long as we still have consensus there. And then I think it was a little looser, but I think we were leaning towards the possibility of keeping the police station building and selling Depot Street. On Depot Street, the discussion needs to really focus around the land. We went back and forth on that. Do we try to buy the land before we sell the building? Do we just sell the building? I mean, if someone's gonna buy the land, I think it's easier for the town to do that than a private citizen. Not that they can't, but I think we have a little bit more negotiating power there. But with that, I'm still having trouble with the state even getting back to us to do some testing on the land or anything like that. So we could move forward with a kind of a contingency type offer that testing be done and we make sure we get a clean bill of health, but I'd let you guys discuss that and then discuss what we want to do with the police building. In your packet, we did get a request from the Friends of Mascoma to see if we would be offering some sort of space. They didn't necessarily say that space, but I know that had been talked about in the past. So just wanted to bring this back up for discussion to kind of continue moving that discussion forward. I still think we have a little bit of time before we vacate those buildings.
As I looked into the Depot Street property, one of the interesting things that it reminded me of is that Susan Brown purchased her front yard from the state. And Angus's property is also owned by the state at the front yard. It's a pretty good sized piece, actually. It's the entire width of the property and 43 feet deep. So it's a pretty good sized piece of property. That complicates the issue of purchasing the property, the land from the state. Because then we have to deal with Angus in terms of he'll want his front yard. We don't want to continue to own his front yard.
We would just be buying the property underneath within the property boundary.
And if we did that, then it's complicated because then we have to have the thing resurveyed and separate out that piece. It's not presently delineated well. So we'd have a survey cost to spin off that particular piece. The other complication is if we decided that we wanted to keep some of the parking on that street, which is a different issue, I'll grant you. But if we decided we wanted to, again, survey required so we can identify what section we're keeping as opposed to what section we want to buy from what section we'll keep and what section from the state, et cetera. So I think purchasing the land has issues. I'd like to see us simply try, and I don't know if it would be successful, sell the building and let the person who purchased it or the developer who wishes to purchase it consider negotiating with the state to purchase the land themselves.
Will the state allow that? I mean, we're technically in a forgotten land of they forgot to charge us essentially, right? At least more or less. I mean, we're in like kind of no people's land and
There's a developer in town who negotiated successfully with the state to purchase railroad property.
oh yeah.
He
no.
may be well experienced in dealing with something like this and would be interested in this property and perhaps negotiating with the state on this land.
But are we
I
selling
don't
a
know.
building where we're like, you buy the building
Yes.
because, well, let me finish. Then you might have to move it. And how would something like that sell? And what would the value be versus us selling it together with the land where the contamination issue was resolved? Because let's be frank, that's very likely contaminated.
I just think that we should not involve ourselves. As you said, the state has not been responsive on the land, and I'd like to see if there's a market to sell the building.
To me, the only real issue is the parking. If the town wishes to keep some parking there, then we have to deal with the land. Otherwise, I agree, Tracy, if somebody has a decent offer for the town as is, I think we should listen to that.
My
Have we
thought,
gotten any-
I'm sorry, John,
Have we gotten any sort of appraisal on the property as is?
you got one.
We
It is
got some-
appraised, but
We got some comps and it was really tough, but
I mean, Norman's
Well-
appraised it obviously, but also, we also had Vanessa Stone look at it.
But the problem is there's no market comparables because people don't have a random railroad building without any land. It's kind of an odd one.
I mean, the question is, do we feel that there's some sort of sentimental or historical value to that building? Or are we thinking someone just ought to tear it down and let's get on with life?
So MFAC answered that, right?
We didn't
No,
actually,
Eric is on MFAC. Eric was on
No, no.
MFAC 1. Well, no, but you were on round 1.
no, I was on
was
all of
Tracy.
it as
You
well.
were too, okay.
We didn't try to deal with what to do with that particular building, other than we designated it for sale.
Well, and but it was acknowledged as having historical value.
Yeah.
That was the one that was acknowledged as having some historical value.
Yeah.
Undefined, but
Correct,
still,
correct. It was
potential.
acknowledged as having historical value.
fair enough.
I guess I want to go back to the parking. It's a favorite, can I please?
Yeah,
Cause you're like.
no, I want,
every
no,
time.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have an idea about the
I
parking
know,
too, and I
but
didn't mean to
I
interject.
just think, parking is a favorite conversation in this town. And the notion that we don't have any parking is something that's a very popularly talked about thing, when in fact, we do have access to some walkable parking like that spot. If we are talking about developing our downtown and we want, what we want our downtown, do we really want to give up walkable parking that's actually flat? Because that's a pretty easy walk to, I'm gonna say it, the new brewery or coffee shop. So I personally think I don't think you want to sell parking in your downtown. I mean, we're not selling it. I don't think you want to give it up though.
Right.
I guess that's my big thing.
We've also been pushing that parking, just so you guys know, as a place to park, to offload your bike and ride the rail trail.
Yeah.
It's a very convenient spot for that, and it moves people away from Mascoma Lakeside Park.
Is there any desire for the town simply to keep that property? And make some use of it for parking and whatever you can do with the building?
I will say that as impact, the recommendation was to sell it.
So,
That was the consensus of that group, was to sell it.
I'm very hesitant to consider keeping another potentially polluted old property. We might as well rename it Shed Street 2.
What if we took the property with, I mean, we would have to, obviously, when we're making our agreement with the state, take in the property, you know, I'm gonna call it our side of the road. And then instead of where the parking sign is now, shift the parking to the other side of the building, because you aren't gonna have an ambulance coming and going from there anymore, right? And so that lot could go with where the parking is now to the left of the building, so that you have a saleable lot and still some public parking. And then if a business were to take it, or an entity that had some traffic, they could still use the public parking too. Where it would be, but it wouldn't be a fully private lot.
My question, and perhaps Ed can answer this, is where Depot Street ends, it abuts the railroad property, which winds around the depot, the building property. And there's quite a bit of land there that would seem to be indicated as a vast wide area as a part of the railroad walkway. That could be a developable parking right there without actually touching the parking which is underneath the building or adjacent to it. And another parking lot could be developed right directly at the end of Depot Street. There's a third of an acre right there. It has a little brush. Now, the other possibility for parking, two possibilities would be that if and when we go to sell the current fire station, we could retain a right of way so that you could come in through that property. And the third possibility is at the end of Depot Street where the, for lack of a better term, drainage ditch is, that it masquerades as a pond. That's 90 feet wide, and there's plenty of property right there to develop a parking area. So I agree, having parking within walking distance is good, and I think a couple of those solutions could work as well without our having to purchase the property.
yes,
You know, are we kind of looking at a solution in search of a problem? I mean, when you take a look at that area, why do we really want to even approach it? You think the state's really going to sell to somebody? You think somebody's gonna buy property to develop a commercial enterprise at the end of a narrow dead-end street? I think it's, you know, it's almost like what we did with the motel site when we bought it, and we put a nice park in there, but do you really think the state would have developed that piece of property or built homes or sold it to developers? I think we just keep our head down, keep using it as parking, and get rid of that building. The building has tons of problems, has a water problem. I mean, it's been on and on and on, so I really don't think we ought to invest into an area that we can use for free. Like, this state hasn't moved on it. They seem to not even want to talk about it. If
The
they
problem is, what do we do with the building? Do we take responsibility? We tear it down?
Tear it down. Tear it down. We don't need any more buildings. You guys don't need
Agreed.
to own any more buildings, you know, you've did a great thing with Shed Street and all that, but you don't need to own any more buildings.
If we, okay, I'm gonna just play devil's advocate. We tear something down in Enfield, the land of everything is perfectly good, and I have to hear it was worth a bunch of money until the cows come home, right? Because that's what happens around here is everyone thinks everything's worth a whole bunch of money. So we're gonna have that problem if we tear it down, right? Like this is a no-win situation. We have a really old, kind of decrepit building. Do we do an RFP and try to sell the building and take proposal?
I don't want us to take proposals on it anyway. I'd like to be turned over to a professional broker. But that's the start of that discussion. I'd like to see if Vanessa Stone can find someone to buy it.
How can you sell an empty building that's not movable?
And it has problems, a lot of problems.
Sam?
Has anyone ever talked to Chet Clem? Or Clem Chet?
Yeah,
Ted Clem,
Chet Clem.
not specifically about that, but
Well, passion for preserving old historic buildings, and he's done so in many different locales. You might be interested. Riverwalk, Wilder, Line.
I mean, Jay Barrett, the architect, actually lives in a depot. And, so, you know, he certainly has a certain interest in, train depots.
Well, I obviously can't commit the Friends of the Northern Rail Trail to anything either, but I know that a number of the leaders have interest in historic railroad facilities, and some of them have some fairly deep pockets and know how to get funding from broader fundraising.
I mean, I definitely think if we put it on the market, there would be interest. That's,
Well, let's try it.
that's my opinion.
And if there's no interest,
I mean, I think the questions are, do we want to make an effort to retain parking? If the answer is no, then we can choose a method of selling it. If the answer is yes, then we need to think through the land underneath. And if we say, oh, we're okay with giving up that parking and we just put it on the market, well, no, then we'll get our answer for us.
So we'd be just writing a bill of sale because it's not a real estate transaction because we don't own the real estate underneath it. We just be like selling the building.
Yeah, I mean, these transactions happen.
No, I know they
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
I mean, it's essentially like selling a mobile home.
right, yeah, no, I mean, that would be the legal construct, I assume. But I do think there's, I mean, I'm torn on, there's value in having parking there. I don't think developing another parking lot is the solution when you already have one, especially when you get that close to the river. You know, having that buffer of trees is very good for the river itself. So I think if we want parking on Depot Street, that's the, you know, however you configure that lot at the end, if you were to subdivide it, that's the place to do it. Do we have any sense of what any potential schedule from the state? I mean, from what I've heard anecdotally from people who have been through it, is it's a years-long process.
Yeah, it can take a long time to actually get the purchase done.
And there's no way we can accelerate that in any way. I mean, I haven't heard of a path for
I
that.
don't think so. It has to go through a
Yeah,
legislative discussion through committee.
as we're talking about our downtown, and economic development and other arenas, is this something that has possibility for economic development? And does it, do you throw it out to the free market, or do you have some interest in, I'm saying as a board, do you have some interest in any preservation element or any kind of control? I mean, we can,
I have an interest in seeing what people say, in evaluating. I don't have an interest in like putting covenants on, because then the town becomes the enforcer of a rule with what will hopefully be a taxpayer in the town, and I don't think that's a good position for either group to be in. But I think that particular property has some historic value, so, evaluating, I guess I'm torn. I don't think it's a pure dollars and cents. I think there is some other value there. And in the end, the tax value will be what it is, regardless of what the person does there. Regardless of what we think, I guess is what.
I guess if we put it up for free market sale, with no rules,
Mhm.
I feel very strongly that we should not accept any contract that ties us to waiting on the state and them acquiring the land.
Mhm.
I think I want to
No,
say that up front, because we could wait forever and never sell this, and then we'd still be sitting at the table.
No, I think you're right. No, we make it very clear what's being sold, and
Like, it's as is, as seen, it's like a car, it's yours. As is, word is good luck. Might be $1. I don't know,
A 200-year-old car. It's rusting.
Don't they have to pump water out of there every?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
They haven't been pumping it for quite a while. They put a lot of riprap under there.
yeah.
So there's actually about 12 inches of stone in the basement,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
dissipates the water.
no, that's not.
Yeah.
Every year.
Has it been tested for contaminants?
We've
Did
been
your hand up?
We can't just go test it. It's state land, and we've been trying to get the state.
Lord.
So one of the things we heard 2 weeks ago at the HOPS listening session that John, you were a part of, and Eric, I know you're there as well, was that increased parking is not a nice to have for downtown, it's a need to have. So we do need parking if we want to see additional businesses come into downtown. I would suggest put it up, try to get free market value for it, but put a set amount of time, like 6 months. And yes, no, waiting for the state. If we sell it in 6 months, or somebody wants to have it for historical purposes in 6 months, great, let's do it. If not, let's rip it down, let's move forward.
I like that idea.
In a nutshell.
I
I
think,
agree.
the problem is the Heritage Committee may tar and feather us and run us out of town, but.
Ellen doesn't here to defend them currently.
Exactly, exactly.
I'm a favor of that proposal. Yeah,
That's what I've been suggesting, I guess.
So
Would you like to
we-
make any sort of a motion?
what he said.
What do you
I
say?
move. Yes, Angus.
As the neighbor of the depot, I'm definitely interested in purchasing it. I am definitely wary of the shape it's in, what's possibly all around it. I'm planning on reaching out to the state tomorrow to see if, they'd be interested in testing it and selling it to me, just to see how that plays out. I wanna do that cards up with Ed and, make sure that we're not bidding against each other, or whatever, but, yeah, I certainly wouldn't want, the biggest reason I'm interested in it is I don't want it to get torn down and become a Burger King, and.
Or you just want your front lawn?
Well, I don't know why Susan went through that 5 years ago, because I'm using it, I've still got my gardens up there,
And
I've
you
still
don't have
got
to
my
pay for it.
disc golf
I know.
course, and I'm not paying for it.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and if there's anything in that ground, it's the state, hopefully, that'll take care of it, if they, since they own it.
In talking to a couple of older people who have been around town forever. I say that friendly, right? The thought is not necessarily that the ground is contaminated, but the interior slab most certainly is contaminated. It was used as a depot by an oil company that then got absorbed by Johnson and Dix. Generally only one truck. They parked the one truck in there, like all oil trucks, they leave. They did not generally, by observation from these individuals, tell me that they parked it outside. So the land outside may not be as polluted as feared. However, the interior slab, that's another point.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I would love to, love to know better what kind of shape it's in. When they did the impact tours and, stuff, I was in there and saw what the basement looks like and I have seen water running out of the pump. Maybe not in the last 2 years, but certainly within the last 3 years, that pump's been active and the pump's still hooked up out the basement window. But yeah, I would love to be able to buy it and send an email to the listserv and say, hey, I just bought the depot. What do you guys want to do with this? Can we have classes here? I want to move. I've got a bike shop's worth of tools there that people off the rail trail could use. Screen printing equipment, all sorts of arts and stuff that I could put there to share and, and I'd love to see what could come of it. I'd love to offer computer and internet literacy classes and programming classes there.
We're sitting here and listening to an offer, if you'd like to make one.
Just about said, I want options.
$1. My father was a salesman and he always said, ask for the order.
I mean, I'm not even tempted to, I would love to put a lot of money into it to make sure it's around long after I am. I think it's beautiful. The inside is even more beautiful than the outside, or at least the top floor.
On basement.
Yeah, I don't have all the money in the world. I'd love to put all the money into rehabbing it, and not buying it. And I have no idea what the state would be willing to get rid of the land, but I'd even love to, if you look at the way the lots are, I'd love to see if the state would be willing to, sell the lot all the way down to essentially where the existing lot line kind of meets the river, where the river gets closest, just to take that all, as one lot and be able to preserve it and yeah, but there's so many unknowns, there's so many considerations, and, I certainly have, the amount of money in my head that I'd be comfortable putting towards this and having it kind of be a project for the rest of my life. But I don't know if it's $5 million worth of remediation. It doesn't seem like it, or whatever, but I'm tempted to offer you $1 right now, but I'm even scared of that.
So we do have to have a public. Yeah, we have to go public regardless.
So we have to do we need a public hearing to surplus it, or how does this, I can't even remember what it.
Oh, look, I think the buildings that we decide to sell, Union Street, Depot Street, I think the right thing is to have a public hearing before we make our final decision. If we're leaning towards those two strongly, even a motion from the select board to move in that direction would be good. Then we can start putting those types of things together. And then we still have the police building.
I'd like to schedule a public hearing to sell Depot Street and Union Street. I know I had some feelings about Union Street before about doing another RFP, but it makes it into another project on the books. And if it goes up for public, I kind of had a change of heart. I know I had said before, but that I really wanted to do an RFP. I think our current zoning is such that a developer who's creative, who wanted it to take it and do whatever, or maybe it becomes something else. I guess.
I can talk to a broker too when you're selling commercial style real estate like that, it works a lot different than a house.
Yeah, they
And
can
we
write you a love letter.
We can have them put in there what they want to do and it can be part of the discussion.
Yeah, they can write you a love letter, which you can't do for residential.
Just, I have background in a knowledge of some of the West Lebanon properties that are on the railroad side, and most of those properties at one time were owned building only, and the property and the land was owned by the railroad when it was still an active railroad. And all those people on those properties, Shields Diner and a couple of the others that are right along that line there, they all paid lease payments to the railroad. They never owned their land, ever. So it's not that unusual. You go back a few years, yes, but it's not that unusual for buildings to change hands without the land. It does occur.
With the good luck to you clause.
So do we wanna,
But I think that's a good suggestion, Kate, is that we should ask for a public hearing. And let's hear from the public and a confirmation.
are we prepared to set a date or do we
Can we
need,
do it on?
or is there background?
I wouldn't set a date, but if we can get a motion to set a public hearing for those two, we will start working on them.
I will make a motion to set a public hearing regarding the potential sale of 18 Depot Street, and is it 20 what? Union?
You can just say Union.
Union Street Fire Station.
I don't know the address. Yeah. I would second Kate's.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? All in favor, say aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
we move
We'll
on.
have a public hearing to discuss the sales.
Yeah, it probably won't be your next meeting, but we'll start working on that. They need to be vacated before we sell them anyway, so it'll probably be later summer before we can move in that direction.
Can't we start showing it though?
Maybe.
Might be able to.
And if Angus raises his bid to $2,
Whoa. Gonna bank $1.
He wasn't planning on spending that much.
All right,
all
we
righty,
gotta hit the,
the police station.
Police station.
It has been our feeling thus far that the police station is the central part of the campus. It's right next to Whitney Hall. Its parking is essential. And we should keep it. So there's one point. We all in agreement with that?
I'm a keep.
Without question.
Okay.
Yes, without,
I didn't, do you need a vote on that? That as a board, we are voting to keep that building?
You can, but if that's the consensus, that's where we're going, then there's no vote.
I move that we keep the police station.
So then the question before us, one of them is whether Friends of Mascoma might be able to get a spot.
okay,
Can we have them come up?
yes.
I think,
So you can stare at the owl.
right. So as you know, I'm Bridget Labrie. I'm the president of Friends of Mascoma, and this is Heidi Reynolds, who is our relatively new executive director, but she's still new. We'll give her. So I don't know if everyone has knowledge of history of, that we've had the pantry. It was in the town office building until COVID, and then we kind of used the police station. The downstairs, one of the garage bays, and it worked out really wonderfully during that time. It was great to still serve the population. And we've made the best of the situation for the last few years. We are coming to a point where we no longer really have an option, so we need to discuss if we are going to keep presence. We would prefer for it to be right there. That's a great location. It's a great resource for the town to be able to get access there when they need food for, community members. And really, the New Hampshire Food Bank is letting us know that we need to have a second location or we're gonna have to change things up. So we're kind of here asking you, and we can provide some numbers too for you all, but we really kind of need something in writing going forward that we're going to be able to do this. And that's kind of where we're at, but.
So you're not thinking by any means of the Canaan facility shutting down?
Yep. Right now,
Well-
we have 3 pantries. That's the thing.
New Hampshire Food Bank has, we would require, technically, the Canaan Food Bank operates 4 days a month out of the Canaan location. We have another agency, which is the Enfield Food Pantry. And since we do not have a location for the last 2 years, I understand, in Enfield, New Hampshire Food Bank has been allowing us to operate the Enfield Pantry out of the Canaan location. There are new restrictions in place, and they've just published a new handbook that says any location that uses refrigeration or freezer space to distribute food to the public, if it operates more than 4 days a month, will require commercial, as if we were a restaurant, licensing, which would include, we would have to purchase commercial refrigeration and freezer units that are exorbitantly expensive. We would have to remodel our existing space in Canaan because it would require different hand washing and a lot of other things that are meant for public restaurants, right? So if we don't get a space in Enfield, we will have to cut our service in Canaan down to only 4 days a month. And we would lose our Enfield license for our agency. So it would greatly impact a lot of people if we were only able to be open 1 day a week. Right now, we have, from Enfield alone, I'll just give you the numbers that I was able to come up with. We're missing a couple data from a couple of years. But in 2018, there were 698 household visits to
From Enfield?
from Enfield, only from Enfield residents.
Now, how are you able to track that? You don't require,
We have to.
We
Yeah, we
have,
do.
You know, we
do.
track what town you're from, so we're not
Okay.
gonna track like,
we've got
Gotcha.
a number of households and number of residents or people in that household. And it's been very consistent, 2018, 2019, 2020. In 2021, numbers went up significantly because of the pandemic. But right now, I think, because we have not had a space in Enfield, the number of Enfield households that are coming to us in Canaan is down to 497. So down from around 700. So it's impacted not only your residents, you know, who are having a hard time getting Canaan to pick up their food. It's gonna impact everyone in these 5 towns if we have to close, you know, one pantry altogether and then are only open 4 days a week or 4 days a month. So
No.
it's really imperative that we get an answer so we can tell New Hampshire Food Bank, yes, we've got this space that's been promised us. It will open soon. Just hang on and please don't shut us down.
so if you were to operate out of Enfield, again, it would be 4 days a week,
4 days a month, yeah.
a month.
Yeah.
Excuse me, yes.
Yeah.
And
that
that
would-
would do a five, about the 5,
Oh, the months that are,
yeah.
those are just one-offs. They don't really,
They're
they're
not
not
just
that
ones that are-
technical about it.
I was like, oh my gosh.
No, they're not that technical about it.
Cause we
Listen.
would, if that happened, we would have to, know pretty specifically,
Mhm.
what days and what hour, what would be the hours?
I think we would keep the same and, last we had discussed, so I don't know if you remember too, we were operating out of the Hughes Park Pavilion and
Mhm.
tents in the parking lot when camp
Mhm.
was happening. That was Tuesday, but we've discussed it would be on Wednesdays. It's a little easier for us to navigate that one, and 3 to 5:30, so we'd be in there a little bit before that, but 3 to 5:30 is our current.
Yeah, we open it actually 2:30 for anyone with a handicap placard,
And so
so that they're not crushed by the crowds.
And how would that work in terms of our requirements for the town and parking and so on? So,
Could be okay. We're starting to slow down then. We can definitely look at it. We're out of town hall by 4, which would open up a lot of parking around that time frame.
And we currently share a parking lot with MTD, and so we have a pattern, and our shoppers know the pattern, and if that has to happen, then that might be a similar situation where we work with the town to figure out what's the best way. We'll have
Yeah.
so many spots, they have a pattern and
We can definitely do.
we
traffic
mark it
control.
out. Yeah, yeah. So it's Case Ferry, wherever, traffic.
Yeah.
Had some theoretical thoughts on what part of the police station would be suitable?
Yeah, if we were to do it, I would think the last Sally Port Bay and the booking room area all the way back would be a suitable place. It would be very easy to isolate that part of the building, and it also gives them, I think, quite a bit of space for refrigeration and dry goods in there.
And it would still be possible while the police station is being a police station.
No.
No.
This would
Have to wait till that's.
Which should be done, they should be moved out of there this month.
Okay.
Yeah.
As
so our
long as we
location-
know it's going to happen, if we have a letter of agreement from you all, then I can provide that to New Hampshire Food Bank. And they would be happy with that. It's just this unknown of, we don't even know if it's gonna happen, that they're kind of saying we can't postpone this decision any longer.
Yeah, they've been.
Are there comments from the board? Kate?
Well, I have a little familiarity with this. Having worn that hat for a little while. And yeah, I think that spot really did work well. And when people were coming up and picking boxes, it was relatively smooth in the parking lot. We actually have more paved area. I think once the lines are marked out, it'll be a little more obvious. But I think getting a spot in Enfield is crucial. Just as my former Friends of Mascoma hat, people walk to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
old
yeah.
one,
Yeah.
and people don't walk to Canaan.
Right.
And so you're not seeing those people who only drive, and there are some people who only drive in town. And then there are some folks who get a ride, or they're getting somebody to pick up their stuff. So I think we've lost a lot of access. That's just my Friends of Mascoma hat. Just as a citizen and a board member, I feel like this is a service that lowers our liability through Health and Human Services. Because we, at Health and Human Services, used to access, I'm gonna call it the dungeon pantry, in Town Hall. And, so it would give Health and Human Services ample access without having to drive all the way to Canaan.
Right.
I had given them the beep, 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 so they could log in if they needed to, and certainly the police were great coming over, but I think it would be easier potentially on our staff. I don't know how often they do it, but for a while it was pretty consistent, especially with COVID. And so just from a saving staff time, and then the monetary aspect of we're getting a free service that we don't have to pay for taxes. I think we get it back that way.
Okay,
I have been a fan of putting it in the police station since we concluded the municipal planning report in 2020. That is the one solid recommendation for the police building that we came to in 2020. Eric was on that committee with a number of us. And it was the one thing that we definitely concluded that we wanted to see the food pantry, if possible, move back into the lower level of the police station when they were out of the way. So there's absolutely no question in my mind that that's something I'd look forward to. I think it's a terrific location for that purpose. Within walking distance, as Kate has said, I see no downside. There's some work involved on your part to make it ready, but other than that, it's yours.
No, I agree. The public good of having
okay,
a food pantry is well worth committing some.
I agree.
Space.
Someone want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we allow Friends of Mascoma to initiate their food pantry in the lower level of the police station once it's no longer used as a police station, which should be, as Ed has suggested, by the end of the month.
Can we help them move? No.
As,
Volunteer.
Don't ask.
Specifically for the town manager to draft a letter of agreement, because that's what they need.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And ask the town manager to draft a letter of agreement.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
I'll
Thanks.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Oh, thank you so
Zoom,
much.
zoom.
Yay, thank you,
The
thank you.
night
thank
is
you.
moving onward.
It is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much
Do you-
Good
appreciated.
presentation.
Well,
Do you have a letter? Would you
Um,
like to draft something?
yeah, I'll draft
They
something
would
and send
like,
it to
and
you.
I'll put it on the letterhead.
Thank you.
That's great. Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
Conservation Commission's application
So this one has an explanation, right?
Yeah, this is the one that was missed. It was turned in before we did board appointments.
Yeah.
The Conservation Commission with your appointments is now full. We would recommend at this time to appoint as an alternate member unless you would like to go back and take away your appointments and reappoint, but
No,
I don't,
I move we appoint him as an alternate.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And John, if I could just add that I apologized during the committee and he did come and sit with us,
Good,
so
good, good.
he's gonna do it and I think, you know,
That's excellent.
Great.
Next, sewer connection request from La Salette Buildings.
I can just say this was mentioned to us when they were buying the buildings and from a town manager and DPW standpoint, we're very happy that they're wanting to connect to our sewer system.
Yeah.
So we highly recommend approving this connection.
is this a force meet at that point or?
It's a force main.
It's a fortress. Is this an accurate number? 3,000 gallons a day is anticipated?
That was their thought once it's in full use, I think.
I'd make a motion that we grant the sewer connection request to. Why is it, and isn't it Chosen Vale or no?
No,
It says Enfield Shaker
it
Museum
does.
La Salette.
Osceola Buildings. Maybe that's what they want to call themselves. That's what their engineer wrote.
AKA chosen.
AKA Chosenville. because
AKA
Chosen
Chosen
Vale.
Vale. Sure.
I was gonna say, cause I think it's Chosenville.
Yeah, that's no problem.
So we have a motion,
Second.
we have a second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Good to be beautiful. Elderly exemptions. And Julie Huntley says all three of these meet the criteria necessary for approval.
I make a motion that we approve the elderly exemption as printed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abatement applications. There are 9 of them. And Julie Huntley says all of them include a narrative from our assessor, Norm Bernache, with his recommendations.
I move we accept these applications with Norm's recommendations that are noted on the applications. Some accepted, some not.
So for clarity, you're recommending we.
I'm recommending we follow Norm's recommendations.
Yes,
Yeah.
always a lot.
Across the slate.
I'll second that. Just one discussion point. Do we have an understanding of kind of why we're getting more, other than just it's the reval? Is there?
I mean, that's the big thing. They expected a lot more than this after
Okay.
the rebound.
Yeah.
They were happily
Yeah.
surprised at the low
That's
number.
fine.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a
will have
second?
more.
Yeah, I second it.
You seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll just let you know, you guys got the ones today that the applicants agreed with the decision, whether it was an approval or denial.
Mhm.
There are more coming that
Got it more controversial.
more controversial, more discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
There are 3 current use applications.
I'll make a motion to grant the current use applications as printed.
Right, all of them meet the criteria
Criteria.
necessary for approval.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you have papers for us to sign? Oh my gosh.
Okay, then, now the charitable and religious exemption.
Chair, oh yeah,
They came in late.
charitable and religious
They
exemption,
just came in this afternoon.
yeah.
It's pretty much the same issues we had last year.
Mhm.
The one little difference is that I don't know if he's gonna say he agreed with me, but me and Norm have had lots of discussions about the whaleback properties, and he does, at least this year, recommend that they be exempted from taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much the same discussion as last year, that he thinks the the portions of Eva, the portions of Chosenville that are rented to private people for a profit, should be taxed. And then Visions has a specific RSA that's like, it should be, but we can leave it with the board. As you remember, DRA did not like our pilots at all. And they pretty much said, are they exempt? Are they not exempt? We came back to you for the exemption. So I guess my recommendation is if we want to go with the exemption again, that we just nullify the pilots and make them tax exempt and move forward. Depending on what happens through DRA and the BTLA, we may want to have some sort of conversation that we might need to move forward with an actual true pilot that's lower than the total tax value, but something that's more reasonably accepted as being legitimate
Right.
pilot.
Yes. Surely my feeling is, I think the exemption is a good thing to do, but I don't think we want to go to court.
I think the exemption is a good thing. I agree with that. My one comment is that I would like to ask Whaleback to once again offer kindly the Enfield discounts that were originally suggested back in 2019 that have faded from view, perhaps due to changes in management, et cetera. But they were kind enough back then to offer some discounts to Enfield, and I'd like to see that reconsidered by them if at all possible.
I got an Enfield pass
I
last
got
year.
that bill passed last.
The prices, but the discounts are no longer what they had suggested in 2019. In 2019, they said that the passes are discounted 50%. They were not this past year.
If I recall correctly, it has been every year $200 if you get it before whatever the first cutoff date, the early bird.
If you actually looked at 25, 26 right now, the price being suggested for Enfield residents is the same as everyone.
Interesting. Oh.
Well, so that would be a good reminder.
Now, I know they have financial difficulties and my full sympathies, and I definitely support the tax exemption. Let that be known, no question. And I'm not necessarily suggesting this is a condition by any means. It is not. I'm just asking them if, as good business and as good neighbor, they would consider looking at the offer that they made back in 2019 and restoring those levels of discount, which have been lost through the years, I think, as the result of probably the change in management. Things sort of fade.
I mean, it's $225, the Enfields. It just went up because that was the early bird.
Oh, it is still $225. Yeah.
It was
that's what
$225.
after the early
Yeah, I
bird
paid-
last year.
I was gonna
So that's
say.
the same.
Yeah, it's the same.
Well,
But that's my only comment, is that I'd like to see them restore the discounts that they offered back then. If they're willing to do it. Just to,
I don't think we can tie that to,
and I'm not tying it, I'm simply asking.
Yeah,
I'm not at all tying it together. I'm just asking if, considering they brought it up in 2019, they would so kindly consider offering it again.
I'm not even sure the museum is still offering the discounts they used to.
Oh, residents are free.
it was,
Oh, yeah?
I was to say, I wandered in and tried to pay one day.
Oh, yeah. All of the residents are free.
Thank you for
They're also
reminding me.
facing,
Yep,
shortage of
good.
federal. Right.
No, I don't think we can get into micromanaging that.
Right.
No, and I'm not, by any means. By any means. I'm just looking at 2019 minutes and seeing the discounts that were offered
Yeah.
at that time.
Legally, we either feel they're exempt or we
Yeah.
don't. feel
Yeah.
they're exempt.
And as I said,
Okay. Are we ready for a motion?
the only other one is, I'd like to reiterate for the board, among this group, that we stand by the exemption of Dartmouth's Sail Club to the maximum of 25% exemption. Presently, they have asked for a full exemption.
No, they're asking, are they asking for full?
Yeah, they're asking,
And
they're
it's
for.
75, 25.
Presently, it's 75% exempted, 25% taxable.
25%.
They're asking for a full exemption. I'm suggesting that we reject that, as Norm has recommended we reject that. It's his policy, his opinion as well. that we stick by the 25% taxable.
I would agree that.
I would agree with that too.
Yeah. They make
75, 25.
substantial use of our resources.
Yeah.
Just in the
Yeah.
confidentiality of this.
And our assessor is in the process of looking at that property with its new valuation, now that it is
Oh, well,
completed,
new valuation.
which is dramatically more than
Well,
what.
years ago. Well, I won't go into it.
I think they make substantial use of our resources. I
Yeah.
think they should pay something.
But we were told that they could get a full exemption.
Oh, yeah, we've been
pushed
told
to
that.
Court.
As I said, I'd like the board to reiterate that it's a 75-25 split.
Maybe we can enforce the speed limit for them.
So the,
Yeah, we
Okay.
can.
so we have a list of the
Over and over.
recommendations for 5 full exemptions. Then 2, 3 partials, and then the recommendation, as I'm understanding now, is to move the 4 that were pilots last year back to exemptions.
That's my recommendation. The pilots are definitely not looked upon favorably by DRA.
Yeah, let's,
So if we're gonna exempt them, let's exempt them.
let's do it.
And,
And also Norm rejected one.
but as we go through, Chosen Vale was a partial. Enfield Evo was a partial. The Rail Backed Up Valley Star Foundation, that was a, Full.
Bill was a full.
Chosen Vale.
Chosen Vale was a full.
Mhm.
But
But we
Evo was
recommended
a full,
Eva was a full.
okay,
He was full.
Yeah,
so all of those were
The
full.
recommendation for them.
It says last year the board granted a full
Yeah, that's what
exemption.
the board granted last year.
Okay, yeah, so we granted full ones for those 4 in the past. Okay. So is our consensus to maintain consistency from past years and do the same?
Yes.
Okay, so then I'll make a motion to grant full exemptions as written for Enfield Community Church, Enfield Historical Society, Enfield United Methodist Church, St. Helena's Catholic Church, Union Church of Enfield Center, Chosen Vale, Enfield Village Association, Upper Valley Snow Foundation, and Visions for Creative Housing, Inc. And partial exemptions as written for Dartmouth College, Living Waters Bible Church, and Upper Valley Humane Society.
That should be upper value,
And-
no sports.
New England Forestry Foundation.
And the
Right.
forestry. Foundation.
And deny the New England.
As we always.
All per Norm's recommendations.
Yeah.
Agree, I would second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Well, we're down to administrative items and public comments.
We have a woman online, Michaela Demeter. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. You have something that was on the table for you. New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project.
Yeah.
And she was hoping to talk to you about that. She's looking for select board support.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Is this the right time for me to talk, or would you like a moment to review the material first?
I think we probably all
I just.
read it, but I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, talk away. It was put on your
Here, John.
table tonight.
Okay,
Okay.
fantastic. I
Take it away.
appreciate allowing me to speak tonight. I'm coming to you from the New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project, and what you have in front of you is a very long letter at this point. The letter itself is not so long, but there are, I think, 18 pages of signatures on it. The New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We are about 6 years old or so. We have our headquarters in Concord. We only do work in New Hampshire. We're not a national organization, and we're just 5 people. So we're a small operation. Our chief goal in the organization is to advocate for the equitable funding of public education in New Hampshire. And so to that end, one of the things we have done for the past 3 biennial budgetation processes is put out this public letter of support for public education funding. And so what is in front is our 3rd generation of the funding letter. And we are going to be presenting it actually tomorrow afternoon to the Senate Finance Committee. You'll see there, I think at this point we have 422 signatures on there. And what we're asking for you to do is to review the letter. And if you as a board agree with what is written there, chiefly that it is the state's responsibility to fund public education, and that historically they have not done a very good job. In fact, I think the letter states that we are 50th out of 50 in the nation when it comes to the percentage of funding that comes from the state for public education, which leaves communities like Enfield at the mercy of very high property taxes to cover the difference because of that downshifting. So the public letter, it does nothing other than hopefully the very important job of letting our legislators know that people are paying attention from every single corner of the state, that people in elected positions care about this, and that we all have a unified voice in wanting the state legislature to do a better job of taking on a larger piece of that pie for education funding. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
I don't have a question, but I would add for the board that I've gone to multiple presentations by this organization, and one of the big things that would come out of this for a town like Enfield in our current situation is that if the state were to look at equitable funding, we might go down slightly in our property taxes. Our neighbors would though as well. Some of the bigger towns like the Wolfboroughs and the Portsmouths that have all of the property value, they pay very, very little in state tax for education. Well, we pay significantly more. So I personally am very interested in this. I think we talk frequently about how the school district portion of the tax bill impacts people's, perception. And it's something that I think it would be good to ask the state to be more careful about downshifting costs on our people.
I would agree with that fully. I'm particularly nervous about what's coming up this year, because I'm afraid the state is going to downshift even more education expenses to local communities because their budget's very, very tight. I think we need to keep pushing to try to make education more equitable throughout the state. I think it's one of the most important things we do, and we need to fund it appropriately. And I think we should sign on to this good project.
Oh my gosh.
Do we have anything to actually sign, or is it simply a motion?
I would make a motion to sign on to this letter and they can add us to the letter.
I would make a motion to sign on for this letter as a select board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank
think
you
I
all
forgot.
very much. To add your
Thank
letter.
you very much.
Thank you very much for paying attention to this crucial issue.
Yes, thank you. That's our job. I appreciate you signing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a
Do you
great.
need us to go follow this link and put all their names down for you? Cause I can
So,
do that.
You can click on the link in the email I had sent has a link to
Mhm.
a Google form where you can fill it out. Because I'm participating in this and I've heard your voice vote, I'm also happy to just do it on your behalf if that's easier for you.
That is easier.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Guys, I can't feel my fingers.
Are you ambidextrous?
She did
No,
talk
and I-
about other signatures. I did not print all 22 pages of the letter. I just gave you the first one.
That's
Yeah.
it.
And I thank you for that.
There were a lot of signatures.
I think we got the gist and it's very good.
Yeah, that goes with the last page, because it goes with the hunk.
It's a nice color.
You can try, but Lisa likes to get.
Where does it go?
I don't know, it goes with the page.
There's a giant chunk of
When,
signatures.
when it gets back to Alyssa, she knows that all the pages have been signed. It's like a flag.
Oh my gosh,
Any
I
more
signed
public
in the,
Any more public comments? Thank you for the reminder.
I signed in the.
Yes,
I just wanted to, I have an email from NEA New Hampshire. They asking me to sign a petition for public dollars on in public schools.
That's because the latest survey showed New Hampshire as the number 50 state
Yeah.
for state support of public education.
Has been my entire life.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming, participating.
Can I just ask one other business question?
I actually
Yeah.
don't.
Do we have a target date for grand opening that we're thinking of? I don't know.
I'm not thinking,
Okay, we're gonna stop thinking about it.
yeah, until the stairs are done, and I think maybe I didn't read that, but I was gonna come back to you guys, but I don't even wanna try until the
Yeah.
stairs are done.
That's fine.
Yeah,
We'll have some small.
you've been burned so many times at this point. I don't blame you.
So, hopefully it's this week, and by the next meeting, we can have a discussion on when we should have the grand opening.
I did have a question, a different item. It says authorization of road improvements on Hackett Road. Do
Oh,
we
yeah,
have to
we're
approve
supposed to do
that? I
There's a,
think,
there's a letter.
and
in there,
I went through it.
But you guys don't have to make a motion or anything.
We don't have to make a motion?
No, to me, that's an administrative.
It is.
John, the gentleman right here does have a question.
Yes,
I have some questions in regards to the authorization of the road improvements at Hackett Road.
on Hackett Road, yes.
As far as what exactly is the scope and what's the scope of this and the reasoning behind the petition?
Can we give him a copy of that letter?
Yeah,
Because I live on that road and
Yeah.
butter to class 6, so.
It's a very minor improvement. I couldn't tell you how many feet off the top of my head, but we have some information.
It's actually a
there.
pretty good distance. I scaled it and it's almost 3,000 feet.
Can I,
Oh, really?
we reviewed it at conservation briefly on Thursday because they had a picture of the damage. So the state had put in, and you were at a conservation meeting in which we talked about, the state had put in some ledgestone to go in, and then it's gotten pretty messed up. So it's basically, and Shirley was there for this, it's a reclamation of the area that's gotten really rutted
a
up.
little
with
bit
log
of that in
landing.
the top portion from where the
Yeah.
state built the log landing on.
Mhm.
Rob Malls had bought the property up there and he wants to be able to put a little bit of gravel in there.
That abuts Goodhue Hill Road. Why doesn't he use that road?
He asked to use Hackett that comes in the side of his property.
The road goes right through the middle, Goodhue Hill Road goes right through the middle of that property. Why? I do not understand the purpose of this, like, one iota. That's like. That's like me asking to put improvements on a class 6 road. I'm like,
Yeah, but Hackett Road goes into his property and Goodview Road goes into his property.
yeah, but Goodhue goes right through the middle of his property.
Yeah. He just came to us and asked to do the top little section from the log landing over.
Mhm.
That's a little more than the top little section.
Well, he asked from the log landing that they made over to his.
Yeah,
property.
that's, I can look out that kitchen window, so I know exactly where that is.
But that's what he asked for, and we normally give homeowners approval to put gravel on roads.
I just don't understand what's its intentions. That's my only concern, because I've heard the rumor of logging activity down that road.
Tag
And
one.
after dealing with that with the state all winter, I'm not a big fan.
Yeah.
And that's a blind corner, and log trucks do not mix well. If you know that road and know where it is, that's a 40-mile.
I'm sure the subside's gonna fall out on you.
And.
Yeah.
Log trucks and a blind corner where people are doing 50 is not a good combination at all. And if you ask DPW about the road date, they were logging that,
So we do sign on that, I guess, don't we?
how much fill was put in there after they got shut down. You will know.
Yeah,
And
Can I-
that's all
This
potential
is
things
all,
that.
so it's not actually just, it's all under the thing. We're signing it.
Whereas these guys.
Yeah, we signed into agreement.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do.
He wants to put gravel on Goodhue Hill Road, by all means, that makes way more sense. One's this short, the other one's twice the distance, that seems an awful lot of fill to put in. For what purpose, I do not understand. It's rather baffling to me. And I just became aware of this recently, which is other disturbing, that I kind of like to know about things going on in my backyard. That would be insightful, to say the least. If I had no awareness of this at all.
So,
Surely this was discussed in conservation. What was the?
I don't know, there's a sign here to know.
This was discussed at conservation committee last week. What was the position of the committee?
This validation will discuss, find out more information on.
Okay, you send
But,
it here.
is it a plastic road?
There I am down.
Yeah,
Hackett, yeah, the one, you
Yeah.
went to visit Hackett.
the top of Hackett Road.
The top of it is plastic, yeah, so I'm not,
Does
I'm
that
not.
change it?
No,
No,
No?
No, there
no,
was
the
a.
town's not supposed to put anything on it, but we often give.
we did that with
What,
Hazen.
Property owner.
what conservation talked about and what I was going to.
I think there's, I found one here, okay,
Was hopefully.
so
Oh, it's that one.
I'm assuming,
Where.
Yeah.
I think the flag probably came off or something else.
Be quiet for Shirley to speak.
That's you?
That'd be me.
Yeah, and we're hoping
Oh,
that
sure, I
maybe
did
the
fold it.
state would be encouraged. Put in.
I don't know if it's one.
If it could, without
Thank you.
being in this person's property.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you.
Just the-
Because it's like a wide,
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of like 3 cars wide there now, and that is a terrible mess. And I
Yeah,
guess they're going to fix it.
you have to realize what you guys walked through the other day.
Just on the beginning of it, because we were looking at signage, is what we were.
Before December.
John, forgive me, on the next one, I started to,
Maybe.
you're signing the wrong line, but. you
Well,
start
that's what the other.
start your signature with a T, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
So,
This was quite a surprise.
right.
Yeah.
As it was to me as well, but I mean, obviously, they were.
It's
doing
huge, it's
cutting
very bad
and they-
condition.
And they chose that as a landing site. But yeah, I would be I have no opposition to them opening up their land, if that's their land, if you want to open it up. Parking up in there where the current landing is, or. Yeah, I have no problems with that. My only concern is not foot traffic in my backyard. To me, I like having the class 6 there because you literally just passing through. No problems with that. No, I bought that property because it reflects that. It's the ability of it. But, I don't understand in this regards. Because where these talking. This parcel is.
Doesn't it still say, stay, 6 well?
Yeah.
It never remained open to the public.
Yeah, it is regardless.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It doesn't change the use of the road.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm like having.
This is all city. He actually.
They made anyone-
Yeah.
You didn't,
Yeah.
Whitney and I sat for going 10 PM, Tracy, 10 PM.
It's really.
So I got crabby, it was like, I need to,
Yeah, go up there, yeah.
I don't even, I think this lasted something.
Thank you.
Think you lost something?
No, I think it probably had a,
Flag or something? Sticker?
word in English is not trombone, it is paperclip.
Oh,
I'm like,
that's a mnemonic that I haven't used before.
no, it's wrong, it's just, I'm good.
look like a little trombone.
No, that's what it is in French.
I have not used that as a mnemonic in the past. I will
I'm
admit.
telling you, when you get tired, not all the words come in the right language, you know? I looked down and I was like, it's not a trombone. It's like,
Here, after road access.
I guess this is pretty, this thing.
yeah, that one didn't have a, yes, the
can't-
paperclip that we just determined.
It did not have a trombone.
It did not have a trombone on it.
Oh,
It just seems like a really odd request for where that property is.
I feel like another great one in French, it's the, un cadelle dans choucroute, like we're cuddling inside of that.
Best work, yeah.
This is just a random piece of paper.
apparently, we couldn't find anything. We think it was clipped to that originally, so.
Okay.
Pass it on.
But we don't know if it had a trombone or a paper.
Yeah, we don't know if it had a trombone or a paperclip. We're stuck in the band.
Oh. That's why AJ can't understand me half the time. All right, I think
You think?
Why?
You think?
I need a shorter name.
Yeah, I'll see if they want to.
Or a less legible cigarette. That's my, that's what I do.
I know, I can't. I mean, I lost a bunch of letters along the way. So we did, where are we?
Thank you.
Shipper fired, 3:30.
Good.
Oh, this goes with all that.
Little big fan of loss.
Listen, what does notice of final tax bill mean? What is that?
It is a notice of the date that the final tax bill was sent, and it is required that the tax collector provide that notification.
Is that a precursor to further action? Okay, it's just a notice that the final tax bill is being sent
Yes,
to be satisfied or not.
it's just, yes. That's the date. It's required to, when the date was that the
It goes
final
with that
tax bill was
giant
sent.
yellow
I see.
folder of,
Okay.
That's it.
Away.
I don't know what the purpose is, to be
I
honest.
couldn't figure it out reading it
It's
either.
a state requirement.
Yeah, I don't think he's planning on.
can we?
I think we can. I move that we
Is there
adjourn.
public comment? Well, I think.
I think we went through it.
Did you?
Very quickly, David.
I'm just wondering if there's any conclusion to that private discussion that's been occurring.
Yeah,
The private
I think it's
discussion.
become a private discussion, David, and it's no longer part of our meeting minutes.
Thank you.
yeah,
So-
we're signing paper.
Yeah, why you do that?
We've done
Yeah.
our bureaucratic requirement. I think we're moving forward.
You haven't adjourned.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.